Hello friends, welcome to Universe of Naruto X. If you love Naruto what if stories and anime explanations, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin today's story. Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki had no idea what he was doing here in this world right now. And while he was still able to remain hidden while he was in the forest outside of the city, everything that he was looking at right now was something that he had never seen before.
What a lame gimmick.
And it was something that made the blonde shinobi from Konoha all the more confused by what he was looking at this ver. Why moment, the blonde looked about and the roads were unlike anything he had seen before in his life. The strange metal-looking carts didn't have any horses or people moving them to their destination, and every so often he spotted smoke coming from some sort of pipe that was behind them. There were more of the strange things and they were of different sizes to Buddhas. He looked at the things carefully and tried to make some sense of it all.
So original.
He had seen some
Don't worry,
things like
Max.
those in his
I'll put a
travels in
vintage
the
filter on it
elemental
right before I
countries
post
as
it
well as his
all
trip
over
to
social
Snow,
medias.
Spring
No.
Country, but they
Why
were
don't you go
nothing
fuck yourselfie?
like the ones that he was seeing
yes,
before him
Victoria.
right now.
I'll get your
And the
bony ass out
buildings,
of my way.
sure, the buildings in places like Iowa, Konoha, Suna, and several others were tall, but there were no buildings this size in all of his travels at all. And this added even more to the confusion that was hitting the blonde. He however decided that he might as well go back to his place and try to make some sense on what he was doing here in this world that seemed to defy just about everything that he knew of. Calmer in a nearby clearing in the forest. Na sat down in the clearing and managed to calm down and begin to piece together what had happened earlier. He had been on a mission, possibly his last mission for Konoha before he had come here. As he began to think on the events, it had already been 3 years since he formally handed the title of Hokage to Konohamaru and decided to travel around the elemental countries. Most ninja would have been marked as missing nin and hunted down. But he was a special case for a number of reasons. The first was his actions in the Fourth Shinobi War, which ended in victory for the Shinobi Alliance and resulted in the defeat of Makabuto Yukushi and his former friend Sasuke Uchiha. He had managed to accomplish his father's hopes in defeating Moa to save the world and honor his mother Kusha as well. And while he had not killed Sasuke, he had finally put an end to his former friend's plans for revenge. It had hurt him to know that nothing he could do would change Sasuke, and he wished that there was another way. But he was not young anymore. He had grown up, and while he did not kill Sasuke, he did not let him win. The power left to him by Itachi proved to be the key to stop Sasuke. And when that was over, he advocated full exile for him. The power given to him by Itachi cancelled out Sasuke's own eternal Magino Sharingan, and this allowed him to blind Sasuke forever, which was why he decided not to kill Sasuke. Sasuke cursed him for this, but he replied that he could handle it, for he was a shinobi
Sorry,
and willing
no
to take the pain
paparazzi
and the
allowed.
hatred to change the world. The second was the fact that he was
Think,
hailed
Max.
as a hero and savior
Rewind
of the
and find
ninja
something.
world. And while there had been some resistance to his desire to reform the shinobi system, the others agreed with him. He rose to heroic status not just in Konoha but in other places as well. And as such, his name was recognized literally worldwide. The third was his being the new Hokage. Sunyun had formally stepped down from being Hokage months after the end of the war
must
and
have
gave
missed
the title to
something.
him.
I
That
should
was
rewind.
shocking, as by all rights he was still a genin. But many ninja agreed that he was no longer a genin in their eyes. His accomplishments and his powers made him cage material
Sorry,
many
no
times over.
paparazzi allowed.
And while he tried to discount it, many people began to state that he was the sage of the six paths reborn. He took the position, and
Do you
while he admitted
understand
that he had
English?
no idea how
Get
to actually
lost.
be a Hokage, he was more than willing to learn and do his best, which was why he formally asked Kakashi, Shazen,
None
and
shall
Yamato
pass.
to be his advisors.
Capiche?
Though the last of the Sannin did not like it, she accepted it out of her respect for him. And he was thankful for her advice and that of his new council and his friends. His reign as Hokage was interesting, and while paperwork was a pain in the neck for him, he was not going to turn down his responsibilities. And besides, his Kage Bush and Jutsu cut down the time he needed for that part of his work. Apart from that, he had been working for the restoration and rebuilding of Konoha after the war, and he was pleased in those days to have so many friends in different places in the world. The fact that he was able to have such allies made Konoha a lot stronger politically, diplomatically and economically. And while there had been battles that he had to be part of, he was more than willing to go all out and do what he could for the people of not just Konoha, but for all the nations. It further cemented his legacy as Hokage and earned him the title of the legendary Orange Hokage. An odd title to be sure, but he did not mind as he had a feeling his father Manado Namikaze and his mother Kusha Uzumaki would have enjoyed it. And the last was his being the head of the newly revived Uzumaki clan. When he took the position of Hokage, he had been given the shock of his life when he was informed by Sununid and Shikaku about the law regarding clans, namely when only one male heir is left. Explained that since he was by all rights the last of the fabled Uzumaki clan, he had a duty to rebuild the clan and it meant being married, and it was recommended that he would be allowed to have more than one wife. That made him blush to the point that he felt like steam was going to come out of his ears. Much to the amusement of everyone, he swore that Sununit seemed to take some slightly perverse pleasure in him being like this, and even Kakashi was grinning from ear to ear underneath the darn mask of his.
See if this works.
When that announcement came out into the open about his full lineage, and the events of that night, it unleashed a torrent of changes in Konoha. The ones who had once disliked and hated him were ashamed to know that they had spent a good deal of time harming the son of the fourth Hokage and also the hero of the whole ninja world. He had spent a large amount of time to assure them all that he had no desire to harm them for what they had done and explained that he had grown up already. He was not the same young boy they knew and he had no hatred in his heart for them. He had made peace with himself and their reasons for hating them. The only thing he wanted from them was to recognize him not as the son of Manado Namikaze and Kusha Uzumaki but as a ninja of Konoha and a young man of worth. He wanted them to also recognize him for his own accomplishments and not for the legacy of his father since he was like his father in wanting to succeed through hard work and effort. The villagers were more than happy to do that and were in full support of him.
They have to be under the
That was also when he had to deal with the fact that he needed to take a wife or rather several wives in order to found the clan. He did have perverted dreams about being with more than one woman at times, but he was not sure that he was ready for such a thing happening to him in real life. Even if it was officially sanctioned by law, he still had feelings for Sakura, but was not sure if she felt the same. And of course, there was the situation between him and Hinata that had not yet been resolved after the Fourth Shinobi War. He recalled her confession to him when she was facing pain despite the fact that by all rights she had no chance before him and he was still shocked by it and trying to make sense on how to properly respond to her confession. They were not on bad terms with one another, but it was still awkward for him to know that she felt that strongly for him. That was why he decided to take some more time to think about what he was going to do before he made his decision on following this law or not. After a while, he managed to speak to both Hinata and Sakura, and it surprised him that Sakura was aware of Hinata's love for him and was actually all right with it. And in turn, she spoke that over time, she had indeed developed feelings for him as well, wishing to make sure that she did what she said. Old to make up for all that he had done for her, as well as try again if he wanted her to do so. This had been a long discussion between the three of them, and it was not long before the three came to an agreement to at least take the time to work on their feelings. He got the surprise of his life when they were even willing to share him as well, and if he wanted they were willing to marry him. The idea of being married to the two of them was something that surprised the blonde Hokage, and he replied that he needed time to think about going that far. However, it was not long before Hinata and Sakura were not the only women who would make that statement to him. Amaru came to him and was there to say that she was willing to marry him as well and help in what he would need in taking care of his people as well himself, along with being a doctor to High M. She was also followed by she and herself as the priestess ruler of the land of demons wanted to further ties between her people and Naruto's own people as well as aid him if he needed someone to help him fight any other demons that might rise to be threats to the world. Not to mention that she wanted to remind him of his promise to help her pass her powers to a new priestess. The whole situation was further complicated somewhat by the arrival of Koyuki herself, who wanted to cement a more beneficial and permanent alliance with Konoha, and the only way to do that was by marriage, and it was obvious who she had in mind as her husband, further confounding Naruto. The next shocker was the fact of the current Mazukog Murumi was also interested in forging better ties with Konoha, plus seeing him seemed to have gained her interest a great deal, making him shake his head at this, not to mention the other women from in Fire Country and outside the elemental nations as well, who came to offer their hands in marriage as well. He knew that most guys would love this situation, and so was he. But this was too sudden to his liking. The good news was that at least he was given the time to build his relationships with them, and that was something he was utterly thankful for. Eventually he began to get used to being around the women who wanted to be with him and developed relationships with Hem. Though the most prominent were with Hinata and Sakura as they were close to him in many ways. His other relationships, which were with Koyuki, Mei, Amaru and Sheen, also grew over time, and for that he was very thankful, as it made the whole situation a lot more tolerant to him until it was time for him to get married once he made his choice. Though he parted in amicable terms with the others who sought him as a husband. The whole affair was celebrated in Konoha as delegates from every corner of the elemental nations came to see the event. After all, it was not every day that the hero of the ninja world was going to be married, and to women with considerable talents, to say the very least. Of course, he had to deal with the fact that his male friends were curious about how the wedding night was for him. He was able to keep his trap shut, but they had no problems guessing that it was quite the experience for him when he was blushing to the point he would have easily surpassed Hinata in the bushing department. Kakashi was utterly amused and had no problem needling him, though in a good way. And even Iruka and Yumoto laughed at it while Sai just smiled in his usual fashion. Though this time around, the smile was not forced in any possible way and was actually real. Afterwards, he was now taking his duties very seriously. And while there were ages of peace in the land, there were still those who sought to incite war and chaos, so his work was hardly over. But with all the support he was getting, he was more than ready and willing to go all out in order to see such threats would be dealt with through peaceful means before going to force when all else failed. Not to mention, his wives were more than willing to teach him a number of skills and techniques to help him if there was a chance that they could not be by his side. And he finally felt the same joy he had seen his father, Manado, had when he was born. When he also saw his children being born, it was sad to him that neither his parents were able to see him finally have children. He could easily guess that his mother Koza would have lovingly doted on her grandchildren, while his father, Manado, would take pride in training them in his free time and when he was not busy. But he had no doubt in his mind that they were watching him in the afterlife, and no doubt his sensei, the pervy sage Jiraiya, was enjoying it as well. There was no doubt in his mind that the white-haired perverted ninja would have written a whole library worth of smut after what he had seen as well. He also took to heart that his children would be another reason, along with so many other youths, for him to defend Konoha for as long as he couldn't be able to. And he in turn would defend his grandchildren when they too would be born. But like anything else, there was a bad side to things, namely in his Uzumaki heritage. He aged slower than the women he married. And due to that bloodline from his mother, it was hard for him to know that he was not going to be able to grow old with them. Even more so with the Kyabe's purified chakra giving him a very high healing factor that made him heal faster and better. This made him become a living symbol of the name of the Uzumaki clan. Initially, he was able to deal with it, but it was not long before it was going to be painful for him, as he knew that his loved ones would pass on long before he would. Sakura and the others understood it and did their best to assure him that they did not have any problems with it. But they did insist to him that he should not burden himself if they passed away while he was still alive and lived to enjoy the world.
Close, but no cigar.
He promised them
They
that,
have to be
but
right
it was not
under
easy
the
for him in
bucket.
any sense, as he had done so much and he was not afraid to die. He was even interested to finally meet his parents and even the pervy sage along with the third Hokage. To know that it would be a long time before he himself reached his end was hard to
I must
accept
have
at
missed
times.
something.
And the
I should
following deaths
rewind.
were hard on him. First was Sununid, who passed on after so many years, though she died with a smile on her face and being surrounded by his children and grandchildren, who she had become a godmother and great godmother too. She was soon joined by Shazan, who had at least been able to marry, and Tuka no less, who also joined her in death, succeeded by their own children. Both were truly important to him, as Shazan was like a big sister to him and a god aunt to his children and grandchildren, and Iruka was
Okay,
like his
let's see
big
if
brother
this
father
works.
figure. Kakashi himself finally
Keep
passed on
walking,
as well,
hippie.
though he had at least been married to Ayami and had 2 children who now served as Jonin, and they too
Victoria
had
is
grandchildren
not
who
getting
were
the hint.
going to be great ninja as well, like the grandfather. He honored his former teacher and placed his name
you
alongside
understand
his own
English?
teammates and their Jonin
lost.
sensei, his father. And he made sure that Ayami's own funeral was well planned out, as she and her also long dead father were 2 more people he loved and treasured in life. His own classmates were also long gone, though they too lived good lives, which was why he was able to deal with their passing on. Though it was hardly a simple affair. Ino and Sai passed on, though they were married and had children when they died. It still amazed him that they were even married, and Sai admitted that being married to Ino was interesting to say the least. He was proud that their children were doing their parents proud, and so did the grandchildren. He had no idea just how the two even managed to finally tie the knot. But he also knew that Ino was happy and Sai was being genuine about being married to her. Nei and Tenten were also married, something that he found rather funny when he was told of their engagement. He had a feeling that sooner or later, Tenten's support for Neji was going to turn romantic at some point in time. And he was not alone either, as Hinata used to tell him that her cousin thought of his teammate a lot more than he used to after the war. They too passed away together, and he made sure that both were buried side by side since they had been working well as a team both in the battlefield and out of it. Shikamaru finally got out and married Tamari as well. And for that he was utterly amused, considering Tama's bossy nature and Shikamaru's dislike for bossy women. But at least despite the differences, they did get along, and at least his lazy teammate finally managed to win Konyuro and Gar's approval of him marrying their sister. Most guys steered clear of Tamari due to her brothers, but Shikamaru finally managed to win their support. And despite his worries, he discovered that his dad was right about women being different with their loved ones. He and Gar were the ones to oversee the funeral respectively, and it was a hard thing to do. Rocky managed to finally be a jonin and rise to the same level of his sensei Guy at his prime as well. This was something that Guy was proud of, and to the amusement of everyone. Even Karani was able to finally meet the love of his life. Yukumo herself had spent time with Lee, and while she could not be a ninja alongside him, she proved to be a person who Lee cared deeply about. Lee loved Yukumo, and she had those very same feelings as well, and they were able to have some chill Dren of their own, and Yukumo was able to see them all grow to adulthood despite the weakness of her body. In the end, Thog Yukumo died due to her frail form. But she was happy to be with Lee, and Lee himself was happy to be with her.
Are you kidding?
When she died years afterwards, Lee honored her by training their children, who thankfully were as healthy as he was to be ninja.
Do you know how much this
Lee himself
fucking
died in
outfit
battle,
cost?
but died with a smile, saving his children from a force of ninja trying to kill them. He personally carried Lee back to Konoha and buried him alongside his team, as well as his wife, who had been welcomed by Nei and Tenten as well. Choji himself eventually found a wife, and the woman was a kunoichi by the name Sua from Suna as well, who proved that even those guys who were big boned as sea. Hoji preferred to call it could get married. Suza was a very attractive woman, but appeared to like Choji a great deal and was not the least bit bothered by his size, much to the surprise of Ino and Shikimaru. They had several children, and she was welcomed warmly by Choji's parents when they finally met her. Even he was surprised at the good fortune that hit Choji, and not a day went by that he recalled laughing with Choji about it all. And it was therefore hard for Choji when Suza passed away after so many years together, but he manned up and became a good father to their children, and then a grandfather to the grandchildren.
What do you want,
And he was
Max?
buried next to Suza when he too passed away, but not before doing the same ceremony for his family, Aries, their firstborn daughter,
Don't.
Chinar. Ka
Don't
and
say a
Akamaru
word
eventually
that
found
way.
their own
Hold that
mates, with
pose.
Ka actually getting along with the Kumo Kunoichi Karui. Though how that ever happened, he could never understand. And Akamaru finally being able to find a mate in a female canine named Kurumuru. Akamaru had a number
I
of
know where
pups,
you
and
live.
Ka as well as Karui
So
had
does
several
Nathan.
children, with Karui being able to be in
Maybe I
Konoha and
shouldn't have
Kumo.
done that.
They too eventually were
Now I have
buried,
to
with
get to my
Ka and
room,
Akamaru
then see
being the
Warren.
first, with Karui and Kurumuru joining them. He personally oversaw the funeral as well to make sure that his friends and their mates would be remembered for all they had done in and after the Fourth Shinobi War. Shino eventually had married as well, with a member of the Hyuga branch family. A kunoichi named Ayahu was a distant cousin of Neji who idolized her cousin and proved as capable as Neji and Hinata, though not as stern. It amazed everyone, even Neji and Hinata, that Shino would find a partner. But they congratulated him and he thanked them in his own way. They have 3 sons and 4 daughters, with the boys able to use the Bakugan and the girls being able to use the Harem clan's special beetles without any problem.
Victoria is going to
S.
be pissed
Shino
we took
and
so
were
long.
proud of their children, and they too had given their lives in the end to safeguard the future of their children in a battle that they took part in years into his reign as Hokage. Gar himself met his end as he died serving Suna after passing the title of K's Cage to his own daughter.
How sad.
With
I didn't write
Matsuri.
anything.
He and Gar were always
I have
friends, and
nothing
he
to
was proud
say.
that Garo rose to being the beloved K's Cage, and he privately thanked Matsuri for being there for Gar. They both died
Home
in
sweet
service
home,
to Suna
my
and befitting
favorite
their time
cocoon.
together. They were buried side by side and he personally made a statue of him and Gar shaking hands, a show of his eternal friendship with Gar. And this was retained by Gar's family and his own as a symbol of unity between Konoha and Suna. Then his wives finally reached their ends as well, with Sakura being the first to pass on after so many years of them being together. His former teammate was still beautiful even when she was as old as when he first met the blonde Son, and he was happy that they had finally been able to be together and live as husband and wife after all that they had been through. They shared one last meal together and went to the training field they were in long ago. They spent the night there together talking about everything that happened to them. The most important was how they finally were able to fall in love with one another despite their history, and how she had been to him in the past. To which he replied that it was not a problem anymore and he would love her either way, much to her happiness. The next day, she passed on with a smile on her face as they sat there in the field, and he gave her a tearful farewell, and when she was buried, he placed a bouquet of sakura blossoms on her grave to honor her and her namesake. Hinata soon followed 2 years after Sakura, and like Sakura, they spent time together before she passed away peacefully in her sleep. They traveled to the places they had been to in their youth and to the places they had been to when they began to date after he had become Hokage. One such place was the very same waterfall when he had actually seen her before but had not recognized her. She blushed at the memories of it and how she felt when he found out. As soon as they got back to Konoha, the two of them spent one last night chatting with their children and grandchildren and how much faith they had for them. And they also spoke about how things turned out with him, still amazed at his discovery of her love for him when they were young and his apology for not being able to see it. She smiled and replied that he did not need to apologize to her. Hinata then passed away the very next day, and like Sakura, he made sure to place her favorite flowers on her grave. Amaru was the next to pass away from a sickness she suffered while serving as a field doctor for victims in a border conflict. But she carried on doing what she loved to do and served the people as best she could. He was proud of her even though it hurt him to know that she was soon going to pass away, as she had truly become someone he respected and loved for her devotion to saving lives without medical jutsu. She served Konoha by teaching Medic Nin how to still save lives should their chakra be too low for jutsu, and also taught him some of her own skills in medicine. They traveled to her home and there she spent her last days healing and tending the sick there before going back to Konoha and teaching her graduating class of Medic Nin. Afterwards, they talked about how they met and how he had been a positive influence on her in the end. As she died of the sickness, he made sure that she was properly buried and placed her favored scalpel on her grave while keeping the medical sash she made for him to use for himself or others. She in herself passed on after leaving behind the title of priestess long ago to her first daughter who succeeded her. She continued to use her power to help seal away evil spirits and demons should they return with Na alongside her. Eventually, her actions cost her as her powers drained her and she died. But not before she and him traveled to the same place where he had vowed to help her pass her powers to the next priestess. She also had helped in training him some new sealing jutsu that would use his chakra in conjunction with the sealing jutsu techniques he learned from the salvaged Uzumaki clan records that he was able to find after learning more of his mother's clan. Sheen and him spent time together in that place, and she too was still beautiful even in old age as she passed away with a smile on her face. She gave him her pin and a good portion of her powers and soul in it, which was why he never left it behind. Koyuki herself met her, and after many years of them being together, she worked hard to be Queen of Snow, Spring Country, as well as wife to the Hokage of Konoha and a world-famous actress. It amazed him that she had so much stamina and energy as well, since in that span of time she also juggled being a mother to 6 active boys and 4 girls, and also perfecting the generator that her father left under her care, and becoming a beloved and respected ruler in the lands beyond her home. In time, however, the strain took its toll on her and she had to eventually retire from being an actress as time passed until she gave the throne to their firstborn son, and she spent time with him and even enjoying gardening with him. When she passed away, he made sure to play her movies, both old and new, and placing the same necklace she wore on her grave as his tribute to his favorite actress, princess, and wife. He also took the swords she had made for him as a present for their wedding, and he treasured them and stored them in a scroll to be used in battle if needed. Mei herself eventually passed away many years after she gave up her position as Mizukage and gave it to their daughter, who was able to have her Kekai Genka as well as the Uzumaki clan's long life and vitality. She was still powerful and strong, and their marriage helped ensure peaceful relations between their respective homes. Their relationship was dynamic in many ways, as Mei was not like most women he had met.
Thirsty.
Though in
I'm the
time he
worst,
grew to
baby
love the
mama.
beautiful Kunoiki, and
Drink
she in
up.
turn loved him in her own fashion, and was happy to see that despite still being a Jinchuriki, he would never lose himself to sadness and despair. They fought side by side many times, and their times together were very interesting. He personally assured her that she was never going to be forgotten. And he made sure of that by having a
That's the
statue of
only
her and him
tourist
in her
picture I
home
let them
village
take
to
of me.
show
That
the
was a
unity
good hot
between them
man.
respective
Kristen and
homes.
Fernando were so
On her
drunk
grave,
hanging on
he
the
made
Fremont
sure to leave
Troll.
behind her favorite things as well as a carved statue of her face in her youth as well. The deaths of his friends and loved ones were hard on him, but he sold on to rule Konoha. But he soon passed the position of Hokage to Konohamaru and lived as an advisor to his former student friend rival. In time, however,
Philip Lorca
he felt that his
Decorsha,
time
my
was over
man.
and he had accomplished
I
all
don't
that
think
he
I
had
could take
dreamed
my
of.
camera to those places.
Ever since he was young,
Look at that
he felt
shot.
that it would be better that
I
he would
love
others
Juliet
go on with
Cameron's
their
Victorian
lives.
vibe.
There was
Talk
still
about
much his
analog
world had to
cameras.
offer, and there was no
Golly,
sense
what
that
a
he could not go out
fantastic
and see
eye.
what was beyond
He
the
could
elemental
truly freeze
nations.
time.
His time with Taigen proved that the world was vast and seeing it all was an adventure in itself, and he wanted an adventure. That was why he decided to leave Konoha and allow the younger generation to lead this time. And also he was going to see the world and the people he had helped protect from Moa and his mad plans of world conquest and control. That had not been easy to do, but the villagers agreed, and so did the rest of the ninjas of Konoha as well as the younger generations of his
nice
clan.
To just relax.
He gave his final
This
words
day
of
has been
advice
so
to
damn
Konohamaru and
bizarre,
also to
it
the head
feels
of the
like it's
clan.
gone on forever.
And after taking all he needed,
Maybe I'll just
he was
wake
on his
up
way.
now and find out I was
But not
dreaming
before
all of
leaving
this.
behind a message that if
Or like
Konoha
Poe
ever needed
said,
his aid,
a dream
then they
within
can
a
call on
dream.
him to come and help them. His travels took him to many places, and in them he met many different kinds of people. Some were good people, others were dangerous and not to be trusted. Some were trying to survive and needed help. The time he spent was not just traveling and seeing the sights that were there to see, though. He decided to take the time to write his memoirs and also continue writing the novel series started by his godfather to honor him and earn money along the way. Even though he had quite the inheritance left behind by his parents and more, he wanted to earn everything by hard work and determination.
Welcome to the real drama queens
He
of
did so, and that felt very good to him in more ways than one. It was not long before he was found by Konohan Ninja once again. They greeted him and even bowed, but he never wanted that and told them that despite his status, he was still a human and wished to be
Hey,
treated as
Juliet.
such.
Is
The
everything
Anbu nodded
cool?
and apologized
yes,
as they
Max.
explained that in
I've
the
locked
years
Dana in the
following his
room because we're
absence,
cool.
his reputation grew to near saintly proportions, and his family was doing well, which was why he was treated with such respect. He learned of a powerful device, a chakra weapon that had been stolen and was
She's
going
your
to be
friend.
used by a rogue force
Friends
of
don't
ninja
sex
who
with
wished
their
to
best
start a
friend's
new ninja
boyfriend.
village with those
No,
who
probably
desired to
not.
return to the old ways.
How did you find
And
out?
meant to attack
why
Konoha
do
itself
you
to bring
care?
down the village.
Why are you
He
even
did not wish
asking
that,
me?
and he placed
You never
aside his
talk.
wandering
Just
days to
zone out
help
with
his
your
village
camera.
once more.
That's why I'm talking
They
to you
tracked
now.
down the rogue
What's my
forces, and
last
while he was
name?
able to convince some to surrender, the others did not. This forced him to fight and showing his abilities in combat once more,
Juliet
which had not dulled in the
Mason.
slightest even after
That was
years of
truly
travel
sad.
around the world.
Thanks for your
However,
concern,
the
Max
leader, a
Caulfield.
ninja named
By the
Karuda,
way,
defied him
Juliet
despite his own
Watson.
respect for Naruto and revealed that he had activated the weapon already, and soon it would be unleashed on Konoha. The weapon was like a cannon shell and would instantly destroy Konoha in the same way Pain had done before as it left the base. He would never let that happen after all that he had accomplished and what so many had fought and died for. He intercepted the weapon with the same
Note to
technique
Max.
of his father and
It pays
managed
to
to use
remember
the same
names.
jutsu to move the weapon. But it
Dane is still
detonated
a
just as he
cheerleader at
used the
heart.
jutsu. All he knew was that he had stopped it before it reached Konoha, and all he saw was white. And he thought that he was finally going to die. He was not afraid as he had done everything. And even though the Kyuubi told him to escape, he did not, as he would be able to see his loved ones again. But instead, he did not die as soon as the light faded away. And now here
Hey,
he was in a
Juliet.
world that made no sense to him in
yes,
any
Max.
possible
I've
fashion.
locked Dana in the
Na
room
knew
because
that
we're
staying
cool.
here was not going to be a good thing, to say the very least. He had to find a good place to hide and gather more
Juliet
information about
Watson,
where he
you
was
be
at this
nice.
time. Nothing was familiar to
I
him,
didn't even think
and
you
there
knew my
seemed
name
to
at
be a
all.
lot of noises and sights,
Of course
so he
I
had
do.
to be careful.
Thanks.
The first
I
order
locked
of
Dana in
business he
because
had
she
to
was
do was to
sexting Zach,
find
my
some way to
boyfriend.
blend it.
Unbelievable.
And he doubted that his clothes that he usually wore were going to do him any good in this place that he now happened to
How do you know?
be in at this
Victoria
time.
Chase.
With that in
You know
mind,
her.
he decided
You
to
could
get to
say
using
that.
his jutsu.
But why
He
would Dana
turned
go
and
after
spotted a
your
man who
boyfriend?
looked fairly well
According to
dressed and
Victoria,
saw that he
Dana
was
would
able
do
to blend
anything
in
to
well
date the
enough.
quarterback.
With that in
According to
mind,
Victoria.
Na used that technique that he
Huh.
recalled very well.
She saw the sex.
Henge.
And
Once he was
Zachary won't
done,
answer his
he
phone.
went out to see what he
Once
could
Dana
learn
admits
from
it,
this
she
world
can
that he
go.
was in.
Straight to hell.
Thankfully, it seemed that the henge was going to be able to do it, and he was soon milling around in the crowds. The people were different than what he was
I'm
used
not
to.
letting her out
Some
until
of
she
them
tells the
dressed in
truth.
fashions that he recognized,
Ugh.
while the others were
Leave me alone,
completely
Max.
different as
Get a
well.
clue.
There were
I'm
people
not
who
letting
had
her
different
out until she tells
complexions
the
and hair
truth.
color, as well as them speaking in a language that was unknown to the blonde shinobi. This prompted him to do what he could to find out just what sort of language they happened to be speaking in.
Hey, Juliet.
But there was also a part
Is
of him that
everything
wished
cool?
that there was someone
Oh,
who
yes,
could
Max.
speak his
I've
language.
locked Dana in the room
It was
because
not
we're
long
cool.
before he found himself going into an area of this city that
Juliet
seemed a lot
Watson,
different than
you
the
be
ones he
nice.
had seen and
I'm
a lot
flattered.
more familiar.
I didn't even think
At
you knew
least
my name
familiar
at
to
all.
a certain extent as he
Of
moved
course
around
I
and the
do.
people looked familiar
Thanks.
to him as
I
well.
locked Dana in
It was
because
here
she
that
was
his
sexting
nose
Zach,
picked
my
up a very
boyfriend.
familiar smell.
Unbelievable.
Ramen, yes. The blonde shinobi quickly
Would
honed
Dana
in
do
on the
that?
smell,
According
and
to
sure
Victoria,
enough, he
Dana
was
would
able
do
to see the
anything to
place
date
of
the
origin of
quarterback.
the smell and saw that
According to
while it was not
Victoria.
like the ramen stand he
Huh.
frequented all
She
his
saw the
life,
sex.
it had a
And
roomy and
Zachary
calm
won't answer
atmosphere.
his phone. Once
He
Dana
opened the
admits
door
it,
to
she
find
can
that
go.
there were only a few
Straight to
customers
hell.
there, and the cook was a middle-aged but kind-looking woman. The cook turned and gave him a smile and spoke to him, but in the same language as everyone he met. Naruto frowned at that and decided to speak in his language. I can't understand what you are saying. The woman looked at him in surprise and then spoke in a different language, one that he quickly recognized. Oh my, a foreigner who speaks only Japanese. Ha, what do you mean by Japanese? ... Weeks later, the woman's name was Natsumi Oyama, and she was the head chef of this ramen restaurant that her family owned for a number of years in the city that was known as Los Angeles. Her family had moved from their homeland of Japan years before as immigrants. Though Na had no idea why they would move away from this Japan place, he was not going to comment until he knew more. He had grown up enough to know that until he got all the needed information, making assumptions was ask. Ing for trouble. It took a while before Natsumi agreed to hire him as a worker in her place, though this required him to be inhemed. Though he was able to wear clothes that showed that he worked there,
That's real nice,
some of the other
Victoria.
workers were not too happy
And
at
who the
him
hell
coming,
thinks I'm a
but after a
hipster?
few weeks, he became a goo. Friend to them. It made it
Boom.
easier that
This
they
is the
spoke the
email I
same
need to show
language,
Juliet.
though they did comment
Now I
on
have to print
Naruto's
this fast
dialect
and
on
get the
more than
hell
one
out of here.
instance. He did give a cover story that his real parents had died while in Japan, and he was raised by his adopted parents in a mountain village, and only recently had he been able to go to this place in the US, as it was called. He was here to try and find his birth relatives as well as rediscover his past identity, but had been so used to living in his mountain village that he was unsure about the customs of the US people. It was all a convenient lie, of course, but Na knew that it had to be done. Even if Konoha, the other hidden villages, or the elemental nations did not exist here, that did not mean he would speak it out. Besides, if Natsumi and the others found out that he came from a village of ninjas and all of his past deeds, they would have called him nuts. Natsumi was nice enough to help pay him and explained all that he needed to know about this place called the US,
This better
their
convince
currency,
Juliet
their
that Dana
customs,
is innocent.
and more. Though, she pointed out that there was more to learn about the land than just from her. That was why she brought him some old books and magazines. And while he disliked reading too many things, the now mature ninja knew better than to scoff at information. He was able to use his cage bush to even up the odds in reading time and soon learned quite a lot about this land, namely the language which he began to practice along with Natazumi and the others in the ramen restaurant. He also learned about these people who called themselves heroes. The most recognized as far as he had seen with these two, the one in the city of Metropolis named Superman and the other from the city of Gotham named Batman. He had to admit
Stop
that it was
zoning,
strange to
Max.
see
You
these
have the paper,
heroes.
so go.
Superman was an incredible sight considering what he was able to do with all those powers of his, and the blonde shinobi had no doubt on his mind that if this Superman was in his world he would have really gotten the attention of the ladies' alley. Sasaki and eventually him as well. Still, the man was rather nice, though the incident with this dark side character left a bad mark on him. But it seemed that he had spent a great deal of time clearing up his name, something that Naruto could respect as it mirrored his own efforts in his youth to be freed from the stigma of being the Jinchuriki of the
Juliet,
Kyuubi.
read this.
Batman was similar to a ninja, judging from his garb and the way he moved, even if they were just images.
Of course.
Naruto had seen plenty of ninjas in action on his side and that of others to know how a ninja moved.
I'm an
Batman
asshole.
was certainly living
I'm
up to
sorry,
the
Nina.
name, but Naruto was
You
sure
are.
that there was more to this
And I
masked
hope so.
vigilante. As he was
You really
called by
think
the
I'd mess
media,
around with
he
Zach?
could see
No.
from the face that
But
this
I
man
get
suffered
stupid
something
jealous.
tragic,
I owe
possibly
you
when he
dinner.
was young to have made
Still
him
love
become
me?
like this.
And you do my
It was
laundry.
reminding him
Thanks,
badly of
Max.
Sasaki,
You're like
but
the
unlike
Black
his
Will
former
Ninja.
teammate
Now
and
let's see
friend,
what
he
Zach
has not
to
gone
say
off and
about
killed people
Victoria.
for it.
You set me free.
Naruto also had to
Thank
admit
you.
that the gadgets he had with
Warren's
him were
flash drive is
interesting
on my
and would
desk.
have really been useful had they been in Konoha or any of the other villages. After a while, he had earned enough money and learned
Almost
enough that he bid farewell to
Get the flash
Natsumi and her
drive, and then
family
I'll
as
go
well
see
as her
Warren.
staff and decided to
Hey,
go out
Dana.
and find a place of his
Seriously.
own to live in.
Thanks again.
He knew that
I
he
can't
did not
believe
have a
Juliet
lot of
locked me
money
in my
with him,
own room.
so he would have to find
Real
another
mature.
source of income at so. Me point in time. Na managed to find it when he was able to compete in a lottery. The luck of the devil Thatsunade had told him that he
Victoria
had
is
was
not
more than
nice.
enough to make him the
I don't
lottery
get
well
it. She
enough and
has
had allowed him to
everything.
win a
And
sizable
to pull
amount
that
of
prank
money,
on a friend?
just enough for a number
Just
of
because
months.
they're in the Vortex Club
And
doesn't
after a
mean they're
while,
BFFs.
he was able to
I'm in
find
it,
a place
and
to
Victoria
stay.
creeps me out.
It was a
Max,
load
you're
better
smart
than
to be
his
a
old
loner here.
apartment and was more
Though
around the
Warren
lines
obviously
of the
likes hanging
Hokage
with you.
residence that he called home when he took office. And after getting the place while in his real form, he was able to get some peace, though he knew that
What do you
he
mean?
was going to have
nothing.
to find some means
When
of
you open the
income.
flash drive, didn't you
Naruto
see
had
the special
learned long
folder
ago
called
as a
Max?
kid how important
Yeah,
it was to
okay.
save and use his
I
money
gotcha.
well.
Are you
So,
blushing?
he was going to do the same here
Go
in
ahead
this
and grab the
reality that
flash
he
drive
was in.
whenever.
And already he had an idea on how to put his non-ninja skills to the use of making sure that he had money of his own. A night later, Na looked over his apartment and was in his ninja garb as he now began to call it. He wore his usual style of clothes and had his red coat on him with the kanji for fire shadow on it. He also wore a mask that was like that of a fox, but had only the lower half of his face shown with his forehead
I
protected
better
there
make sure
above it as
everything is still
well.
in there.
The mask was specially
I
made
think
from
Warren
ceramic and
forgot
was
to hide
chakra
the Party
reinforced,
Buster folder.
so it would not be broken
Not that I
easily
would
and could
open it
only
no
be
matter how
removed if he
tempting.
removed the
I
invisible
have
chakra
my
strings that
self-respect.
held it in place. He also happened to have his vest on, and he had his supplies to boot as well if he needed them. On his back were his swords. His supply pouch was on his back and on his thighs were his kunai holsters which were naturally loaded. This was going to be the first time that he was going to go into Los Angeles in disguise and his ninja garb as well. He had no doubt that this was going to be different from what he was used to, but he was alright with it as this was something he was interested in doing ever since he got into the city. The apartment was not too far from the city and was not filled with people, so he doubted that anyone was there to see him, and it was at least 4 stories up without any other building nearby. He might not have any furniture of his own at the moment, but once he found a way to get his own money, that can be solved. With that in mind, he left behind a cage bush to manage the place while he was gone and helped make sure that anyone coming around would think that he was not going anywhere and was staying home. As he left the place, he was able to use another addition to his arsenal, which was kunai armed with spi. Chili-made climbing cable reinforced with chakra. This way, he could move about as if moving on ropes while using his abilities to walk on surfaces once he reached them. Any distance that he could reach with leaping, he was able to tackle well enough while looking around the city while using his chakra to hold onto the surfaces. The blonde had to admit that a place like this was certainly different at night, but he had no doubt that it had its share of troubles. Even Konoha had its share of troubles under his watch, and he had no doubts in his mind that the same could be said for Los Angeles. The crimes that happened here might not be in the same way as those in his reality, but they came fairly close, and Naruto was sure that he was going to run into some of those said crimes soon enough. And he was right on the money, for at the very moment he was in the city, he spotted something, and what he saw was more than enough to get him angry and heading in that direction. In an alleyway. No. Leave me alone. A pretty redhead was trying to keep away several thugs from getting closer to her. She was trying to keep herself calm at this moment, but she was terrified. Right, had just left her place earlier in the afternoon to pick up some books from her friends, but they had gone to a nearby coffee shop for a drink and some time for themselves, and it was now late in the night that she was going home. Her senses were on alert as she moved through the way, but she was soon able to see the men following her. She was shocked by this and tried to lose them by running and getting home, but they were not going to let her get away. She had no other weapon with her, not even a can of mace or anything. So, she ran, but sadly due to her panic, she had made a wrong turn in the alleyways, and now here she was. One of the men grinned leerously at the young woman and spoke in a very tone. Now, why would we do that, missy? We're just in the mood for some fun, plus some cash, if you have any, that is. The young woman reached into her purse and took out the money from her wallet. It was her hard-earned money from her part-time job, and she was saving it all for a chance to find work, and it was hard to part with all of it. But no amount of money was worth her life as she tossed it to them while it was still in the money clip once it was there before the thugs. She prayed that they would leave her alone, though she doubted that. Here, that's all I have. Please take it and leave me alone. The leader of the punks took the money and counted it with a grin on his face, and the same could be said for the rest of his followers. But any hope the young redhead had of being left alone was dashed to pieces when they continued to close in on her. The leader took out a wicked knife and spoke to her once more. Not bad. You've gotten some nice dough on you. Now, let's see if the rest of you is just as good. The redhead tried to get away, but her escape was cut off when one of the thugs intercepted her and pushed her back. She fell on the ground and tried to recover herself and managed to kick away the punk who tried to get to her.
Please, leave
He
me
groaned
alone.
from the kick to his stomach, but he was not deterred by that. He and his buddies had her surrounded, and there was no escape for her. They finally got some money, and they were now going to have some fun.
Hope you enjoyed the
The
show.
lady was very good looking
for
and had a nice
nothing,
figure to
Max.
boot. No one was going to save her, not like in Metropolis or Gotham or anywhere else that had those costumed heroes. Los Angeles had none of their own, and that was good for them in every sense of the word. However, that idea was soon sent down the crapper as the punk was suddenly stopped dead in his tracks when something suddenly wrapped around him. And before he could ask, what was that? He screamed when he was suddenly lifted into the air. The other punks and their intended victim were stunned by that as the group tried to look for their
Hey,
companion with the
why don't
leader
you
shouting
leave her
out,
alone?
"What the happened?"
Excuse us.
Another
this
punk
is
shouted
official
out,
campus
but this
business.
time in pain as he was clutching his legs. Both of them and he saw two large double-ointed
Nobody is
needles in his
bullying
thighs and his
anybody.
legs were
I'm
bleeding
doing
but he
my
could
job.
not
No,
move
you're
as he
not.
felt himself
You're
becoming
part of
numb.
the problem, Missy.
He however
I don't
managed to
remember
spot
this
something nearby
conversation.
and pointed to the wall. His companions turned to look but saw nothing. They were able to turn back to their wounded companion and
Oh,
were
Max,
about to
that
ask
was
what the
great.
hell he was pointing
I think
at.
you scared
But they
him for
got their
once.
answer when they saw
I
another
have to
figure
go,
behind
but
their
thank you.
companion who now
It
dropped
means
face
a
first
lot.
into the ground
Anytime,
unconscious. They were now facing Narrat, who glared darkly at
I
them.
felt like an
The woman
everyday
was
hero
stunned at
helping
what she was
Kate,
seeing, and so
now
were the punks
Officer
until the
David
leader spoke
Dickhead
out in
is
a bit
after
angry
me.
tone. Who the air
Maybe I
you?
should rewind
Nar
and
said nothing
mind
at
my own
first,
business?
but then replied, "The name's not important right now. What I am going to do to low lives like you and your loser friends is what you should be concerned about." Oh yeah, you some sort of nut job in a costume who thinks he can be a hero. What are you going to do to us anyway? Nar glared even more and decided to end the taunting and replied, "You guys are so pathetic to actually be ganging up on a woman like this. Are you losers so disgusting that you can't even afford cheap dates?" That infuriated the group of punks, and the leader made that obvious as he struck first. "Shut up. I am going to mess you up right now, freak. Bad move. ... Nar was not impressed. This guy was moving too slow to be even a threat as he casually dodged the strike from the guy's knife, and he avoided the rest without moving at all from his current position. He then lashed out with a powerful kick that sent the man flying back and hitting the ground hard and skidding away until he collided with a trash can. The other punks
glad
were
I
stunned
stepped
by
in that
that,
time.
and that was the
Can't
opening that the
stand to
blonde
see people
shinobi
being
was waiting
bullied.
for as he quickly charged in. The punks only saw a brief flash of his yellow hair as he unleashed a world of pain on them. The punk nearest him was introduced to the blonde's elbow strike to the stomach that sent him crashing down hard in pain as Narrat used his back as
What up,
springboard
Max?
to land
How are
two
you?
kicks
Here's
into
your
the face
flash.
of two other
Thanks.
punks that sent them flying
problem.
back. One of the punks managed to recover from the shock and tried to blindside the blonde, but got nowhere as Naruto was quickly able to dodge his attacks and appear behind him and land a punch the second he turned that sent him down. The blonde evaded another punk armed with a chain, but he caught it and used his strength to yank the guy forward and used his arm in the same way as Karabi and it did. Though he used no chakra or element in that attack, as the punk was too weak to use it on to begin with, the man was sent to the GR. Armed hard as Naruto quickly flipped forward and introduced his feet to the chin of the next one as he used his hands to lift himself up like a rocket from the ground. He then lashed out with a spinning kick in midair to send another punk flying as he struck him right at the head. As he landed, he spun around to avoid the next one who was armed with a broken bottle intent on stabbing him in the back. The fool moved past Naro and the blonde introduced him to the ground with a sweep kick followed by an elbow strike to the back of the head. He then turned and introduced a series of finger strikes on the next attacker, hitting in spots he knew would work to stop the man cold and used full-blown fists on the next attacker while the first was frozen stiff. The blonde then used his knees to strike at the second attacker and finished off the two of them with powerful kicks that sent them going off to La La Land. The former Konoha Hokage and Shinobi looked to see that the punks who attacked him were all out cold. They were all unaware that he had not used his full strength on them, as doing so would have either crippled them or killed them outright, and he was not in the mood for that since they were not true threats. But a shout of fear got his attention, and he turned to see that the leader had somehow managed to get hold of the young woman and had his knife by the throat. By now, however, the man was in a panic and tried to find a way out of this mess. You let me leave right now, or else the _ gets her throat cut. Naruto glared darkly at the armed man who held the woman by the throat with a knife and spoke in the coldest tone he could muster. Harm even an inch of her and your life ends here and now. The thug saw so methaning in the masked man's eyes that told him that this was no idle threat and that shocked him as he began to feel a great deal of fear in himself. With that fear growing by the second, he finally relented and dropped the knife that he had on the young woman's throat. All right, man. She's all right. See, are we cool? Nar said nothing, but he reacted as he charged at only a quarter of his already impressive speed. And that was enough as he quickly grabbed the punk and tossed him over the woman he had held hostage and smashed him to the ground while disarming. Gee him of the knife. The shock of it was more obvious to the young woman, but Nar expected that and calmly relaxed himself as he searched the lead punk and found the young woman's money. He took that and offered it to her while speaking in his most calm and friendly tone. Here you are, miss. I believe this is yours. The young woman looked at Nar and as soon as she realized that he was not going to harm her, she reached out and took her money. She felt instant relief as she realized she had just been saved from not just being robbed, but far worse as well. She broke into tears and nearly collapsed. But Nar quickly saved her and spoke to her. Are you all right? I just realized you saved me not from just being robbed, but oh my god, what they could have done before you came along. Nar said nothing as he allowed the woman to cry so she would get the emotions out. He glared darkly at the punks and wished he could have really given them a serious beating, but he was not going to do that before a woman who was by rights a civilian. As soon as he felt that she was all right, he turned to her and spoke once more as she wiped away her tears. You feeling better? Why, yeah, thanks again. I'll call the cops and tell them everything that happened here. Thanks for saving me. Anytime, miss. Oh, sorry about that. My name is Eleanor Riley. Most of my friends call me Ellie for short. Ellie, nice name. Fits such a pretty lady. Ellie smiled a bit and had to admit that her rescuer felt nice. She watched him move away and to her amazement began to walk up the walls as if it was nothing to him at all. She had heard about some heroes being able to do that, but she had never seen it done before in front of her. She then realized that she had not gotten his name. Wait, who are you? Nar turned to face her and after a moment or two of thinking, he replied, you can call me Fire Shadow or in another language, Hokage. With that, Nar moved up the wall and soon disappeared. And that was enough for Ellie to call the police. He had a lot to tell her parents and friends about what had just happened to her. As for Nar, he had not gotten too far when he felt his danger senses kick in, and he moved quickly. On the road, the gun battle that was raging in the streets was getting fiercer by the second. As Naruto finally arrived at the sounds that were in the area, He looked to see a number of cars in black and white with flashing blue and red lights. His reading of Natsume's materials told him that these were cars owned by the police, a sort of government-sponsored civilian peacekeeping force and not part of the military. He saw that their situation was not too good, and while he would have just let them handle it, the sight of several wounded police officers and civilians brought back images of the battles he had been in. The battle with Pain, Nagato, and the aftermath of the Fourth Shinobi War came back to him, and that was enough to make him move fast. The robbers were armed with high-caliber weapons, and the police were still not able to do much until SWAT arrived, as their weapons were not doing well since the robbers had high-grade body armor on them. Things looked very grim as several of their comrades and some of the civilians nearby were wounded and paramedics were there. But with the bullets flying about, they couldn't move to help the wounded. This was how bad it was, and the police had a hell of a time trying to keep the media from getting hit as well. They were about to get some help as some of the robbers who were reaching for their clips suddenly were unaware of a strange knife-shaped object land in the group. They were not going to be unaware for long as someone suddenly attacked them from behind. A few of them were sent fleeing backwards and the others turned to see a strangely dressed guy appear in their midst and apparently armed with a pair of short knives. They turned to try and deal with him, but they were in for the shock of their lives as the man moved too fast for them to get a good low CK on him. Naruto was not going to let them get a chance as their weapons reminded him of the kunai spewing weapons of the Sky Ninja that attacked his village a long time ago. Though these were a lot more dangerous than those were. Several of the robbers were badly injured as Naruto quickly used his wind chakra to amplify the cutting force of his weapons, and also he used his strength to a slightly higher degree to hit his targets. The kunai's amplified cutting force allowed Naruto to cut through their weapons and body armor AIs. Wounding them but not killing them outright as he wanted to let the police handle that as this was still their job. But if he could keep these robbers from harming more people, then all the better. He then placed aside his kunai and switched to his swords, and with the training he got from his old friend Karabi, he was doing a very good number on his foes right now. Already the results of the blonde's rescue were obvious as the paramedics were able to get to the wounded and treat them while the more critical ones were evacuated when SWAT arrived. The police were not shooting as they were not willing to risk hitting the one who had just came in to help them. And the media themselves were now trying to record what was going on before them as the new person was helping the police. Naruto himself noted that and decided to end it quickly as he cut through the weapons of his attackers and used his taijutsu to even up the odds in the battle. He placed aside one of his swords and took his special kana and placed it back as the last of the robbers fell down to the ground, his shoku cut in half and him out cold. The scene might have seemed peaceful had it not been for the now incoming armored truck that was being driven by one of the robbers. Apparently, he and his posse had planned to use the armored truck as an escape method once they were able to take it from the bank's garage, as this bank happened to have one in said garage. He was about to meet up with the other when he spotted from the TV what was going on. And now he apparently wanted to run down the one who had made him and his crew miss out on what would have been a very sweet score. That would have been the start of a career as they would use the money to pay for more powerful weapons and equipment to rob even more banks not just in La but elsewhere as well in the US, with the exception of the cities that had those cape-wearing heroes in them. And now it was ruined by this new guy, and he planned to reduce the blonde into a pile of bloody messed up to hell roadkill. Not that Na was going to let that happen as he placed aside his sword. Na glared at the truck driver as he readied his technique to stop the last thief dead in his tracks. He summoned his chakra and soon formed a sphere of pure energy, which surprised just about everyone in the area. He then slammed the ringan right into the front of the vehicle and focused his chakra into his feet to hold him into place.
She looks so hopeful
Rasengan.
and pretty.
The result was explosive as the
what happened to
Rasengan
her.
slammed hard into the vehicle's armored front. And with Naruto's much stronger chakra reserves behind it and his refined control abilities now at the forefront, it was going to be explosive indeed. The truck stopped with a roar of metal as it was lifted off its feet briefly before the metal buckled hard and began to warp and crack on impact. The vehicle hit the ground as its engine was completely mangled by the impact force alone. The driver was not thrown out of the vehicle due to wearing his seat belt. But the results were just as surprising for him as he gasped in horror from the impact force and from the landing as his vehicle hit the ground with the armored skin in the front cracked and bent. He didn't have time to react as Naruto moved to the driver's side and used his wind chakra to cut through the door and toss it aside. And he cut him loose from the seat belt and to the ground to the police. The police and the media looked on in shock as the battle was over and the blonde shinobi turned and gave them a smile and bowed. He flicked his hand up to a building and all they saw afterwards was a flash of yellow as the man disappeared. They looked around but found no trace of him and thus they began to try and piece together what had just happened right in front of them. As for Na, he was already a block or two away from the whole scene as he held his father's Hiroshin Kana in hand. He had learned about it from Kakashi years ago, and after years of hard work and due diligence, which Sakura herself had told him he should have when they were kids, he was able to succeed and make his own. It was hard work, but it was worth it, and his old man would have been proud of him as well. He sighed and had a feeling that sooner or later, he was going to be in for the long haul. No doubt the very second the Kaiba and him talked about it. That demonic fox was going to ride his case as Natsumi put it once. He moved away from the scene and headed home just as the night was soon going to be drenched in rain. In the Daily Planet the next day, as the day went on in the Daily Planet, several of the reporters were currently turning into the news, namely that from the City of Angels. The video was from last night and had only one topic in mind. A violent shootout between a number of bank robbers and the LAPD was brought to a swift resolution last night when an unknown figure appeared and fought with the bank robbers. The figure was dressed in black and orange and wore what appeared to be a short-sleeved long coat of red with black flames with some sort of Japanese writing on it, which our analysts have translated to mean fire shadow or in this case Hokage. The images showed Naruto's battles with the thugs and how he had stopped the truck bearing down on him. Much to the interest of the reporters, some of whom included Jimmy Olsen, Angela Chen, and the recently arriving Lois Lane and one Clark Kent. They were all watching as the blonde Hoage Ringan smashed the front of the truck hard, and they also watched as he yanked away the door and had the driver down as he joined his already unconscious friends. He then used some sort of energy sphere to stop the vehicle cold and soon faded away before he would be interviewed. So far, all attempts to locate this Hokage, as he is no doubt becoming known as, have not succeeded. Though in another story, a young woman named Eleanor Riley had met the Hokage as she had apparently been saved by the Hokage from a band of thugs who had tried to rob her as well as violate her. He arrived and beat them before things could have escalated and Miss Riley had only good things to say Abu. The Hokage after he had saved her. As the interview of Riley came to a close as the punks were being arrested by the police, the reporter then spoke. In this reporter's humble opinion, this is a blessing thus far. For years, the city of Los Angeles has no superhero or heroine to its people in the same way as Metropolis has Superman or as Gotham has Batman. Only time will tell how this new addition to the City of Angels would fare. But for today from TV8 News, this is Dana Carmichael bidding you a good day and to you Hokage, a warm welcome to the City of Angels. Lois smiled a bit and turned to Clark and spoke. Looks like Superman and Batman are not going to be alone. What do you think of this new kid on the block, Smallville? I am not sure yet, Lois, but he's certainly a skilled fighter.
Oh,
Jimmy
yeah?
nodded and replied,
Brilliant.
yeah,
What's your
and
first
he
move
looks
gonna
rather
be?
young. Many late teens or early
jump?
20s.
You're such
Kind
a
of like
poser.
Supergirl,
If you
I
can't even name a
guess.
simple nose
Still,
slide or a
it is
trade
kind
flip,
of good to
you
know
should
that we
walk
have a
on.
new hero to the ranks. Clark nodded, though he still looked at the image. Who are you? Clark had a feeling that he was not the only one who was asking that very same question as well. No doubt Bruce and the others of his family would be curious as well who this new face was, and no doubt
What's
Bruce
up,
would be
Daniel?
very critical of this new
Hi,
youngster.
Max.
And Clark
Could
had
I,
a feeling that he was
ask you
going
a
to run
question?
into this Hokage at some
Would you
point in
mind
time.
letting
He
me
was not
sketch you?
sure when,
I
but
do
if there
put
was one
my
thing he
sketches
knew
on
that he could
Facebook
count
though.
on is that his gut feeling was right on the money. The world of heroes has just
be
gotten
honored,
bigger.
Daniel.
Makes
me feel
To
like
be
a muse.
continued.
Funny, you should say
Author's
that.
notes.
I was
There we
just
go.
thinking
The
about
challenge
my
of me
real
making a
names.
NAR Justice League crossover is
Rachel
now finished.
Amber.
And I hope that the reader who came to me and gave me this challenge is happy that I was now able to do what she wished. Sorry if I cannot recall the name, but it had been some time since I heard from him
Okay.
or her.
Why don't you
So,
start drawing me?
I hope that
Even
seeing
though
this
I
in my
must be a
collection
step
is
down
enough
from
for
Rachel.
now. I will
No
be
way,
updating this
you're a
story along
good
with my other
substitute.
works. Though, this will be at a much later date than the others since I did plan to work on my older fics
Oh,
before
that's a
my
good
more
posture.
recent ones. I promise not to make new stories, but decided that it was better to do this since I am going to be freezing my Halo stories anyway and some new blood was in order. And since the chapters for G.I. Joe Halo and WoW Halo are already in production with the former nearly complete and the same could be said for the latter.
Best portrait ever.
I feel confident about doing this, though it will not be updated while I update my older works since I have a slew of new ideas for my older works. ND some of them will be ending soon. So I will focus on them first. And yes, I will also be working on my stories for those who have been waiting for a while for me to do just that. So don't ask me about them already. Now, if you want to know if I will pair Naruto with Wonder Woman, the answer is not yet. I have plans of my own. And while Wonder Woman is indeed a possible choice, there are others. But I will follow the path of my Halo story. Lois Lane is off limits. So is Black Canary. Damn it, Huntress. Double damn. And the same goes for Hot Girls since they have their own partners. There might be a Harem idea in the relationship department since I am planning to go back to that genre, but I will still like it if I take the time to make the relationships work. Remember that in this story, Naruto is not able to die of old age due to his Uzumaki heritage, and the Kyuubi's healing chakra adds to that. So, he looks to be around his late teens to early 20s, but in reality is already in her past his 60s or nearing his 70s. Sahi is actually a load older than most. He is not immortal in any sense. He can be killed, but it will be a while before he faces a tough enemy that takes him to breaking point. And he is not going to go down without a fight. I will allow him to learn some new jutsu, which use other elements due to his long life and ability to learn with the Cage Bush and his dedication to winning and his hard work ethic while here in the DC universe, which can be a real ace in the hole considering who he had to deal with in this new reality that he happens to find himself in. Not to mention that since he has been married to several women and had been with them for a number of years, you can bet that his knowledge in being with women in an intimate sense will be well. I'll leave that up to you all to decide what you think. As for powers, this version of Naruto has all of his already known physical abilities and jutsu along with his Sage Mode and the Kyuubi's purified chakra to boot. I will naturally allow him to use some other elemental jutsu due to his long life and years to mastering many techniques. But first off, don't expect him to be able to do Kekai Genka at all since doing that would be cheating. So he will not be able to fuse elements together unless he uses Cage Bush to mold one elemental chakra with him doing the other. This due to him learning from his wife Mei, who uses her own Keki Genka of lava and boil release, as well as his training under Kakashi when he made the foundations of his recent jutsu. And if he does use it, he can only use it for an allotted time, as overdoing it is not good since the other elements are not his natural ones. The power left to him by Itachi will be revealed when I know what it is myself from the anime and manga. So feel free to try figuring out for yourself. Until then, he will also be able to match Rock Lee and Guy's style of fighting, though he is not a user of the Drunken Fist and can't use that unique style of his old friend. He will also have a variation of Hinata and Neji's fighting style, though it is not as effective since he does not have the Byakugan-like wife and cousin-in-law do. He also learned how to use his chakra to amplify his own strength in the same level of Sun Unit and Sakura, and has some of their Medica L techniques, though he uses them on others and not always on himself due to the Kyuubi's healing powers. He will also have some considerable Kenjutsu skills due to his training under Karabi and also due to his wife Koyuki's gifts of swords that respond to his chakra. Though he is not at Karabi's sword mastery level, as he only uses 2 swords in battle, and no, he will not have the Samahada since that would be a bit much even for me. He will carry a number of other weapons to boot, as well as the kanai used by his father, as he does master his father's flying thunder god technique, and he can summon the same chakra chains as his mother, though he only uses a smaller number of chains and they are not as strong as Kush's. Those same chains will be useful in battle as well as for moving about, as he will be moving around all as Spider-Man in this FIC of mine. That's pretty much it. And do not forget, he is not a pure immortal. He can be killed, so don't expect him to be a godlike being. While I find godlike Naruto stories to be alright to some degree, too much of them can be annoying at times. The busy streets of the place known to all as the City of Angels was so different from what one who was not a native was used to. And that
It's cool,
applied to the disguised blonde who was
Don't stress.
currently walking the
You're okay,
streets
bro.
in a
Just
set of clothes
count to
that were
3.
the kind one associated with a regular teenager to
You
an
own
earlier
this school.
adult
I want
who
it,
had his
I could
own
blow it
sense
up.
of clothing style.
You're the boss.
Naruto wore a set of black denim pants, a white shirt,
what do you
and a
want?
green with black vest on.
I hope you check the
The
perimeter,
only
as my
thing that
step
would
ass
have
would
been
say.
different about his
Now,
appearance was his
let's talk
ever-present
business.
I got
birthmarks
nothing
on
for
his
you.
face,
Wrong.
as well as
You
his
got
now
hella
red hair,
cash.
which was
That's
still
my
spiky
family,
butt.
not me.
Oh,
Draped
boo-hoo,
downwards,
poor little
the
rich
blonde
kid.
had
I
managed
know
to
you've
get
been
his
pumping
hands
drugs
on
and shit
washable
to
red
kids
hair
around here.
dye and used
I
it to
bet your
color his
respectable
hair.
family would help
Na
me out
made
if I
sure
went
to
to
pick a
them.
color that would
Man, I
match
can
his
see
mother
the
Kusha
headlines now.
Uzumaki's own deep red hair so
Out
it
of this
would be
bitch.
different.
I
He
can
had
tell
done so in
everybody
order to
Nathan
avoid
Prescott
being
is a
seen in
punk ass
public
who
since
begs like
if
a
he had
little
not
girl
done
and
it and
talks
left
to
his
himself.
hair in not
You
only
don't
the
know
natural
who the
shade
fuck
and
I am
style,
or who
it
you're
would have
messing around
attracted
with.
Where'd you
attention.
get that?
He
What are
doubted
you
that they
doing?
would have
Come
recognized
on,
him
put
as the
that thing down.
Hokage from last
Ever
night.
Tell me what to do.
But if there was
I'm
one
so
thing Naruto
sick
learned
of
in his
people
long
trying
life
to
and
control
career as a
me.
You are
shinobi,
going to
there
get
was
in
always
hella
a
more
need to be
trouble
ready
for
for
this
anything.
than drugs.
Nobody
Besides,
would
it gave
ever
him a
even
chance
miss
to
your
actually
punk ass,
try
would
and
they?
have the very
Get
same
away
cool
from me,
red hair as
psycho!
his mother.
No.
He recalled easily how he had loved his mother's hair when he had been able to speak to her for the first and last time in his mind during his attempt to finally control the chakra of the Kyuubi long ago. Kusha smiled and loved that as well as
Whoa.
loving him deeply, and that had
What
been
the
the key to
fuck?
him winning the fight. And she laughed at his words on how cool he would have looked with her hair color on instead of his father's.
That poor girl.
Now he looked the part, and that made him
held up my
smile even
hand.
more. And so far
then
it seemed
I
to
was
be
back
working as he
here.
moved through the city well enough without having the resort to hench. Still,
already heard
it
this
amazed him to
lecture.
see the city of Los Angeles. It looked so different in the day compared to what he
Now
had in the
Kate is
night
being
when he went
hassled
out
again.
only yesterday. And this was the
And if the
reason why he
tourist
took the
phone
time to
rings,
disguise himself and
This
explore.
is real.
He could have used hench once again to try and
give me an
move about
example
like
of a
last
I
time.
cannot believe this.
But he decided against it
condition in
since
black
there
and
were
white.
now alternatives that he
Okay,
could use.
if I'm crazy,
And thus he did
might
not
as well
need
go
to
all the
use his
way.
chakra. That was going to be
Can I
used for other
actually reverse
purposes, and
time?
as such more practical disguises
Why
were a
artists?
must for something like
Because
this.
of her images of
In an
hopeless
internet
faces.
cafe,
You feel
wow,
like totally
this is
haunted by
different. Those were the words came from his mouth that easily described this
rewind.
place he was in right now. He had seen the very large number of people there in the building and wondered what was this all about. He had managed to reach the inner areas of the
did
city and had seen a large number
actually
of people
did it.
there, and him being the
Photographer who
curious
perfectly
one that he was
captured me
decided to
behind
take a
the
look and see what was going on. And the
Anybody?
things he saw in there were impressive to say the very
Max,
least, as he saw
don't freak
computers
out.
and more
Not
all
yet.
over the
There you
P.
go, Victoria.
Place.
Why
It was not
Argus?
that Na had no
Because
idea
we're
about
together,
technology.
Max.
Far from it,
You
as
feel
he
like
was
totally
very
haunted
familiar
by the
with a
eyes of
number
those
of
sad
things
mothers.
here
I
in
took
this
my
world.
selfie, Jefferson asked me
TV,
first.
refrigerators,
If he
radios,
does again,
and even a
I'll
few
know
other
this is for real.
devices such as water heaters,
Keep that to
watches,
yourself.
toasters, and a
Seriously,
few
though,
other things were
I could
just
frame
as
any
common
one of
there
you
in
in a dark
Konoha as it W.
And capture you
As
in a
here and
moment
the
of
other
desperation.
villages as well. But he
And
had to
any one
admit
of you
that some
could
of
do
the
that.
things he
Anybody
had
else
seen
looked
thus
at
far
this?
were utterly
What
new
would
to
they
him.
think?
These things called computers, video cameras, cell phones, iPads, MP4 players, printers, scanners, all of these were so unknown to him. And even though he had seen a number of these already, the cars, motorbikes, airplanes, buses, and more were utterly alien to him. None of these were seen as common to him in his mind back in Konoha. Even this internet was amazing. It was like all the world's news and more were made into one very accessible source and location. And so far, he could see that the technology in this world he was in was more than enough to make the technology back in Konoha, or at least some of it, look old and obsolete. As he continued to work on the computer that he had paid for with some of the money he had on himself, he began to explore the internet and the computer to find out what he could. The first thing he did was search if there was anything related to the layout of the city he was in. The night before, he had managed to explore most if not all of the city of Los Angeles, but he needed a map, and that way he would know just where to go and what to do. He turned to one of the staff and asked a few questions. "Excuse me, yes, sir, how do you take this map from here and place it on paper?" The young attendant looked at Naruto with some level of confusion as he thought that everyone already knew how to use computers, unaware that the redhead before him had no experience whatsoever with computer systems. After some time, the map was made for Na, and he in turn was given a short idea on how the internet could be used for anything. One such thing was something he knew that his godfather, the pervy sage Jiraiya, would have enjoyed immensely when he checked it out. Even he was impressed by what he was looking at as well and couldn't help himself as he smirked somewhat. Man, I can bet the pervy sage would have loved this. Who knows what sort of ideas he would have gotten. As he placed that thought aside, He decided to see what else he could learn, but he knew that he was going to have to be rather careful about it. Using cage bunken to learn stuff was one thing, but doing that in a place where such techniques could arouse trouble and too much scrutiny, and that was something that went against his training. It was possible to use cage bunch and use henge on him, but that would be taking a good amount of chakra. And while his control was a load better than what it was before when he was younger, way younger, that is, he was not too sure about the idea of unleash. Hing 1,000 cage bunch and then using henge, since henge still required him to see a person and make an exact copy of said person. And naturally, making a number of copies of other people was bound to get attention. This was why he was keeping his reading to himself. And while it was already beginning to stress him out a bit, he was not going to complain. Later,
Too obvious?
it took quite a while for him
What
to
if
get
Arbus
his work
chose to
done.
capture people at
But
the
at least he
height
now had a
their
map of the
beauty or
whole
innocence?
city and would not have to waste
She
too
had a
much
brilliant
time
eye.
moving out.
So
But
could
that
have
did
taken
not mean
another
that he was
approach.
going to have an easy time
have
of the
to
whole
admit,
thing as he
I'm
went
not a
about
big
to get
fan
his
of her work.
bearings.
Still the same
Having a
stupid
map of
picture.
the city with a bird's eye view is
Everything
one
seemed the
thing.
same as before.
Being on the ground and looking
He
for said
captured the
location
essence
was
of
something
post-war
else
beat
as well.
America.
But he
Still
was
the
not
same
going to
stupid
make too
picture.
much of a fuss.
So
He
everything
naturally
seemed the
marked
same
the
as before.
places where he could find
You don't
food
have
shops
beauty
and
without a
restaurants
beat.
if he needed to grab
Which
a quick bite.
explains why Frank was
He looked
Kerouac's
around to make
photographic
sure that
muse.
he was not
And
going
no
to
pencil
stand
case is
out
still
like
in
a
the
sore
same
thumb,
place.
and he was
1950s.
happy that his disguise was working
We've all
fine so
seen that iconic
far.
shot of
He then
Kerouac on the
decided to
balcony.
go and see
And if
any
you
other
haven't,
sights that he
shame,
might
shame.
have missed.
Capturing
He
the
also
romantic
made
earth
sure to keep his eyes and ears open in case of
and
trouble.
solitude of the 20th
He had
century
some
poet.
supplies hidden on him in sealing scrolls,
You dig?
which he could open and use. This included special containers filled with water so he could wash away the red hair color. The next were his ninja clothes and naturally his weapons and equipment. Most people would have been shocked by the fact that he was a ninja and he was wearing those kinds of clothes and in broad daylight. Considering where he came from, ninjas doing morning missions was not unheard of and he had done a fairly large amount of those missions. He also decided to read up on what was the view of ninjas in this world. And what he learned was not exactly something that he had expected. When he discovered that they were not able to use chakra like he could not help but be surprised by that discovery. The way they used the Enjutsu that he was familiar with was both familiar yet odd as well. And the gear that they were known or suspected of using was both familiar and yet not at the very same time. Na also had to admit that some of the documentaries made about ninjas were partially right and also those films were somewhat close. Still, he had yet to meet ninjas in the flesh, though Batman was the closest one to that description, as the man was no doubt trained well. So far, this world's technology and what he had seen was something that he was still getting used to. But at the very least, there were no shortages of things to do, places to see, and women to look at every now and then. So far, however, there was nothing going on that would force him to go into his
can't
ninja
stretch time
uniform, and
anymore.
for that, he was thankful. Hours later, man, what a day. Na silently said to
Anybody?
himself as he entered what was a small diner. The smell of food that was unlike anything he had tried before was new and
Anybody?
tempting to him. He had enough of his
Bueller?
previous winnings to get
Diane
himself a
Arbus.
meal, which
There
was
you go,
something that was
Victoria.
called scrambled.
Why Arbus?
Eggs with
Because
bacon
of
and
her
toasted
images of
sourdough
hopeless
bread.
faces.
The
You feel
waitress
like
smiled
totally
at him in a
haunted by the
rather
eyes of those
perky and
sad
friendly
mothers and
manner.
children.
Is there anything else you want, mister? Narrat looked at the rather nice-looking woman and noted that she would have to be in her
Anybody?
late teens and seemed to be in a rather happy
Bueller?
mood. No
Diane
doubt
Arbus.
hoping to finally take
There
a
you
day
go,
off from
Victoria.
work now that the
Why
night was
Arbus?
coming in.
Because of
He
her
smiled
images of
gently at her and
hopeless
replied
faces.
in a respectful manner as he had matured well enough to know when to give respect to
You
others.
feel like totally
I
haunted.
am all right, though I would like some juice if you have any. Sure thing. We've got grape, apple, lime, strawberry, and watermelon right now. Which would you want? Na thought it over and replied after a moment or two. I'll take the watermelon. Sure thing there. Give it a few minutes. Okay. The disguised blonde nodded as he went back to trying some of the food and found that the food was not bad to him at all. It was actually rather nice and totally unlike any of the food that he was used to eating back in Konoha. Though he had recalled trying something similar back in his traveling days. The sourdough bread was a new thing for him, though, and he was eager to dig into the bread even more. The waitress came back with his drink, and Narrat found the drink to be rather nice. However, his danger senses kicked in just as another man wearing a jacket came into the place. Na kept his cool while keeping the man in his sights, trying to discern what the reason was, that his senses were telling him to keep an eye on the guy. It was not long before he noted the way the man seemed to sometimes move his hands into his pockets, like he was either checking something or making sure to have his hand on said it. The guy also seemed to be looking around in a way that told the ninja that he had less than friendly intentions. Naruto's feelings were right on the money when the man moved towards one of the waitresses. And before anyone else would notice, with the exception of him, the man took out a knife and grabbed the waitress. The scream of the waitress was enough to get everyone's attention as people screamed as the man now pressed the knife into the throat of the woman he now held hostage. All right, shut the hell up. The owner of the diner moved out and saw what was happening.
I'm in class.
Naruto sensed that he had
Everything's
tried
cool.
to reach for a weapon
I'm
but
okay.
stopped when he saw that the man had a hostage. But he tried to speak and reason with the man. Hey buddy, take it easy here.
Can you give me an
Screw
example
you,
of a
old
photographer
man.
who
I
perfectly
want
captured
everything
the
you
human
have in that
condition in
cashier
life?
of
Fall
yours
asleep
right the hell now.
and
The man then
shouldn't
looked at
feel
the
like a
people
dream.
including Naruto and spoke
Weird.
seriously, and if
Diane
any of you
Arvis.
try calling the
There
pigs
you go,
here then I
Victoria.
got this woman
Why
right now
Arvis?
and take one of you and
Because
do
of
the
her
same.
images of hopeless
You
faces.
got me.
You
The
feel like
frightened
totally
people
haunted by
nodded
the
and
eyes
so
of
did
those sad
Naruto,
mothers
but he
and
was
children.
hardly afraid.
She saw
Compared
humanity
the
as
numerous
tortured,
foes
right?
he had fought back in
And
his
frankly, it's
world,
bullshit.
this guy was barely at any level.
Keep that to
Heck,
yourself.
even an academy student
Seriously,
would
though,
have been a
I
lot
could
more
frame any
dangerous
one
than
of you in a
him.
dark corner.
But he did have a
Capture you
hostage,
in a moment
so no
of
one could make a
desperation.
move.
And
Even
any
though
one
the
of you
former
could do that to
Hokage could
me.
tell that a few of the patrons were eager to try
Isn't
and
that
stop
too
him,
easy?
Naruto knew he could
Too
easily
obvious?
take this guy.
What
But
if-
using
Look
his
at this
ninja
crap.
training was out of the
How can I
question
show
since
this to
it would
Mr.
attract
Jefferson?
attention. He had to
can
let
hear the
others
class
do the
laughing at
move,
me now.
and to do that, he needed to give them an opening. And he already had a very
Arvis
good
chose to
idea on
capture
how to
people
do
at the
just
height
that,
of
as
their
he reached
beauty
into
or
his pocket
innocence.
slowly and took out a
She had
coin.
a brilliant
Plus,
eye.
The
it's
blonde
perfect
did it
for me to
quietly
have
as
to
the
get my
man
daily
began to
selfie
herd
quota.
some of the more terrified people
I
away
have
to the
to
door,
admit,
no
I'm
doubt
not a
to
big
block it
fan
with
of
their
her
own
work.
bodies just in
I
case someone
prefer
came in.
Robert
He
Frank.
in the meantime was still shouting
too,
expletives
Victoria.
towards the owner to
He
hurry up
captured
and
the
give him
essence of
cash.
post-war beat
Na
America.
noted that the ones
And there
who
was-
he had seen were
I
ready
believe
to make
Max
a
has
move
taken
were
what
looking
you kids
intently
call
at the man and not at
selfie.
him.
A
Good,
dumb word
now
for
we
a
make the
wonderful
opening.
photographic
Hope
tradition.
to Kami this
And
works.
Max
Na was
has a
carefully
gift.
moving out of the way as he
Of course,
studied the
as
one
you
who
all
was
know,
trying to
the
rob the
photo
diner
portrait
he
has
was
been
in.
popular since
He
the
knew that he
early
needed to get
1800s.
into an angle
Your
and that would then
generation was
allow
not the
him to
first
attack.
use images for
Thankfully,
selfie
his ninja
expression.
training had paid off as he had
Sorry,
made sure to improve
couldn't resist.
himself during those
The
years
point
back in
remains that the
Konoha,
portraiture
and he was
has
soon able
always
to
been a
get to the
vital
angle
aspect
that
of
he
art
needed.
and photography
The
for
guy
as
had his
long as
hostage
it's
and was
been around.
focused on the waitress and the others, but
Now,
had not
Max,
noticed the disguised blonde.
Since you've captured our
As
interest and
Naruto
clearly
got a
wanna join
small
the
coin and
conversation,
waited
can
a
you
bit more
please
until the man
tell us
turned.
the name of the process
He
that gave
focused
birth
some of
to
his
the
chakra
first
into the coin, and
self-portraits.
once he was sure that he had coated the coin well enough with his chakra,
did know,
he made a quick and
but
sharp
I
toss
kinda
and sent the
forgot.
coin right at the man's
You either
arm,
know this
namely
or
at a
not,
nerve
Max.
area that would
Is there
cause not
anybody
only
here
pain,
who knows
but if
their
hit hard
stuff?
enough,
Louis
force the
Daguerre
man
was
to
a
drop
French
his
painter
weapon,
who created
and hopefully that would allow
daguerreotypes,
him
a process that
are
gave
the other
portraits a
patrons
sharp
to try
reflective
and take
style
down
like
the
a mirror.
man without risk
Now
to
you're
themselves.
totally stuck in the retro
In the
zone.
very same moment,
Sad face.
the chakra made the coin heavier and
Very
thicker,
good, Victoria.
but not enough to cut through
The
the skin,
Daguerrean
but
process
naturally would
brought
impart
out fine
enough force
detail
to
in
hit the
people's
nerve that
faces,
Na was
making
aiming
them
for.
extremely popular
The
from
attack from the
1800s
blonde
onward.
was more than
The
enough
first
as the man
American
shouted out
daguerreotype
loudly as a
self-portrait was
sharp
done by
pain
Robert
snaked through his arm.
Cornelius.
AAG.
can find
The
out
attack
all
made
about
the
him
man drop the
in your
knife he held,
textbook. Or
and
I
that
haven't
was the
kept up with
moment
my
some of the
journal as
other
much as I
patrons
should.
needed as one of the larger ones got up
Guys,
and
don't
attacked
forget
with
the
a
deadline
football
to submit a
style
photo
attack.
in the Everyday Heroes
Play that
contest.
sent the
I'll fly
man
out
to
with
the
winner
ground.
San
The
Francisco,
pain
where
of
you'll be
both
feted
attackers
by
and
the
the
art
surprise
world.
of it all
Great
was enough to
exposure,
make the
making
man
Kickstarter
loosen
career
his grip on the
photography, so
waitress as
sell
another
out.
man
Melissa,
came in to
get
help
it
the one who
together.
tackled the
Taylor,
robber by kicking
don't
the
hide.
knife away.
I'm still waiting for your
The
entry
owner
too.
came
Yes,
in and
Max?
brandished a
I see you
handgun and
pretending
forced
not
the
to see
man
me.
to stop struggling at the sight of the firearm. Call 911, later. Man, that was a heck of a first night. Na arrived at his apartment and took off his mask, coat, and vest.
Victoria doesn't waste a second
Once he was in the
kissing
room,
ass.
he made his way to the living room and placed his swords on
I
the
should've
small
known.
table that he
She'll
had with
have
him in
better
the room
equipment
and
than
sat
Blackwell.
down on the nearby chair. He groaned a bit and felt his body begin to relax after a very long night on patrol, as it were. After the episode with the hostage-taking thief at the diner, Naruto was able to evade the cops and disappear, something that was good at now and had a lot of experience doing since a vast portion of the people were still in shock and dealing with the thief.
Of course.
He also made
Victoria
sure to
has
blend
have
into the
bestest,
shadows that were there
newest,
before before
most
quickly
expensive
washing away his
everything.
hair color, placing his hair back to the way it usually was,
I should have
and then
known.
getting dressed.
She'll have better equipment
Once
than
that was
Blackwell.
done, he was now moving about the city and had to deal with a few other problems as well. There had been some muggings that he broke up, some thieves trying to steal jewelry and other things of value, a few carjacking attempts, a few drug trafficking attempts, and a few serious street fights. None of them were in the same league as the things he had dealt with in his younger days, but they happened quite a lot. That was something he had to accept since Los Angeles was a very large city compared to Konoha and the other cities he had seen in his travels, and the police were no doubt working very hard to keep the peace in the city. That was why he did not interfere in some of their actions unless there was a situation where the police were either unable to help in time due to distance or were outnumbered and unable to handle the situation. He had to give them credit for taking such risks in their professions as he had read about them in the internet on his travels in the city. And while there were those among them who used their position and authority for their own ends, the rest were good men and women.
You're a better
Na got
photographer
up and
than
headed
life.
to the refrigerator and
I
took
know
out
it's a
some
drag to
ramen.
hear some
And after
old
taking the
dude
time to
lecture
eat them,
you.
he also
But life
decided
won't
to
wait
grab
for
some
you to play
fruit and a
catch
good
up. You're
drink
young,
of
the
cool
world
and
is
still
yours,
very
blah,
much
blah,
fresh
blah,
milk
right?
as well.
But you
Some
do
of the
have a
things he
gift.
had managed to
You
get
have the
before his
fever to
outing,
take images,
finding a
to frame
supermart
the
a fair
world only the
distance
way
from his
you
new place
envision it.
once he settled in.
Now,
As he ate
all
his
you
food,
need
he
is the
began to
courage
think about
share
the
your
other
gift with
aspects
others.
of his time in this
That's what
world.
separates the
His time
artist
as Hokage
from
had
the
helped him
amateur.
see that he was still in a very unique situation. One concern was the fact that he was indeed an unknown person in this world he was in. There was no doubt in his mind that none of the things he knew were going to be found here, so he should not
You
bother
didn't
in
tell me
trying
how
to
cute I
F.
looked yet.
In them, this world would no doubt
Welcome to
begin
the
to
real
question
world.
who he was, and sooner or later, there were going to be people who would try to find out more about him. Back in Konoha, before he became Hokage, he knew that he had the registered paperwork as a citizen and
I
ninja
need
of
a serious
Konoha,
timeout
as
in the
well as a
bathroom.
member of the
Splash water
ninja
on
army
my
of the
face
land
and
of
make sure I
fire,
don't
and
look
when
like
he
a
became
total
Hokage,
loser.
he had dealt with a few instances where he had to fill in citizenship registration papers for a number of reasons, namely when his children were born. Here he had none of that. He did not have medical records, no birth certificate, no nothing. And if there was one thing he learned well, it was the lack of these things that instantly sent warning signals to people in government. He should know since when he had looked through the files after the war. He found out about Kabuto's own files when he was taken in by a Konoha medic nin when he was found in a battlefield so long ago. That was why he had little problem entering Konoha in the past since he had already files on hand. To show that he was a citizen of Konoha through adoption, he needed to address this soon as his second concern was involving his own living space. Not many people wanted to live here, and thus there was a chance that someone was going to be rather curious why he would willingly live there. Staying in the apartment might give him a place to rest, recover, and whatnot. But without any records, it was going to look very odd. This meant that sooner or later, he would have to find himself a place to live that would be off the grid, but still keep him close to the city if he needed to be. Another concern was money. He had thought of it before, but he had a lot of things on his mind at the time. Winning a lottery was one thing due to his rather potent luck that even his wives had
Nobody
said
can
was
see my
like the luck of the
meltdown,
kami, but
except
this
for
was a
me.
completely different matter entirely. Winning a large amount of money was no doubt going to get attention from people, and there was no telling if they were people that did not have bad intentions. In Konoha, his winning of the lottery was not too much of a concern. Here it might be. He however still needed money in order to buy the things he needed, and as such he needed to have a source of income.
Just relax.
Hiring
Stop torturing
himself out as a
yourself.
ninja was a viable option, but
have
he was
a
not sure
gift.
if it was a good option. There were no doubt other people who hired themselves out for legitimate and less than legitimate work and get paid for it. These people no doubt would have no desire for heavy competition, and there was no doubt that they
When a
would
door
try and
closes,
deal with
a
him.
window opens.
And while he could be an assassin,
something
he
like
had not
that.
killed anyone just for money alone. When he finally killed
Okay,
both
bro, you
Kabuto
don't
and
get a photo
Moa,
op like
he had
this
been
every
paid
day.
handsomely. But these men were totally irredeemable and had to be taken out as soon as possible, and money was the last thing on his mind. He had a huge amount of Rio, but he knew that the currency in his world was not going to be acceptable. So, he needed money that was native to this world. He thought it over more and more, and it was not long before he hatched up a solution.
Whoa.
And just
where
as
did
he
that
was about to
butterfly
do
come
it,
from?
he got a call from none
It
other
doesn't
than
look
his
like
former
any
resident,
kind I've ever
the
seen
KV.
before.
What the heck is
The blue
cooking
wings
up
are
in that
practically
mind of yours
glowing.
again,
I
brat?
can almost feel
It's
the
been a
air
while,
moving around
furball.
me.
How have you
The
been?
butterfly
Na
feels
heard the
almost
KV
like a
growl
spirit.
darkly at that, and the demon fox who had been his resident for years respond to that. If it wasn't for the facts that I can't kill you since you and I are still tied to live together,
It's cool,
I am
Nathan.
no longer as powerful as
Don't
I
stress.
once was,
You're okay,
and the
bro.
fact
Just
that I finally
count to three.
developed a real respect for you. I would
be
eat you
scared.
alive and
You
piss on your
own the
remains
school.
after I
I
take
want
over
it.
your
I could
body.
blow it up.
But you're not
You're the
going
boss.
to do either, right? Don't get snidey with me,
So
brat.
what do you want?
You and I might be on
I hope
much
you
better
checked the
terms
perimeter,
than
as
when
my
you were
step-ass
still a
would
shrimp
say.
and when you finally
Now,
grew up.
let's talk
But we are
business.
hardly
I got
going to be
nothing for you.
full-time friends.
Wrong. You got
You
hella
and I
cash.
are allies of
That's my
convenience
family,
and nothing
not
more.
me.
Oh,
Nar
boo-hoo,
snickered at
poor
that
little
as he
rich
knew
kid.
that to some
I
degree
know
the
you've been
Kirby
pumping
was
drugs
right.
and shit to kids around
Even
here.
after their time
bet your
together,
respectable
his
family
control
would
over
help
the
me out if I
Kaili
went to
chakra and to the
them.
Kirby's
Man,
grudging
I can see the
respect, the
headlines
defeat
now.
of Matera and his
Leave
allies
them
as well
out
as
of this
Sasaki,
bitch.
they were hardly
I
good
can tell
friends.
everybody Nathan
He had
Prescott is
taken
a
the
punk
Kirby's
ass who
hatred
begs
in the
like a little
past,
girl
and
and talks
eventually
to
they
himself.
became respectful
You
to
don't
one
know who the
another,
fuck I
but they
am
were not
or
like
who you're
Karabi
messing
and his
around
own
with.
Where'd you
Biju.
get that?
He still
What are you
kept the
doing?
Kirby sealed
Come
away,
on, put that thing
and he knew
down.
that if given
Ever
even a
tell me
sliver of
what to do.
chance,
I'm
the
so
Kirby would try to
sick
take
of
over
people
his body
trying
and
to
use it for
control
its
me.
own
You are going to get in
needs.
hella more
Maybe
trouble
we
for
are,
this than drugs.
but you have to admit that we did a
Nobody
lot better
would
working
ever
side
even
by
miss your
side than
punk ass, would
going
they?
after
Get
each
that
other by
away
the
from me,
throat.
psycho!
I did help you gain your desire for revenge against Moa for the crap he pulled on you after all. GR. Fine. And at least you are no longer a weak container like before. I swear, every time I think about how you used to be, it makes my
What the
stomach
fuck?
groan and my teeth ache.
How?
And
How
at
can
least
that
I
be?
finally got to see
I
you
was
get
in
laid
the
and married to
bathroom.
worthy mates.
He
Shame
shot
the
that
gone,
poor girl.
but at least those were good times.
I held up my
Naru
hand,
frowned at that and replied,
and
have you
then
been peering
I was
into my
back
memories
here.
again? It's a habit since there's nothing to do while you are in control.
I already heard this
And
lecture.
besides, I only get to go out when there is a need for it. So, what
Now
is on
Kate
your
is being
mind
hassled
anyway?
again.
You've been making a racket for a while now,
And if
and I
Victoria's
am getting
phone
annoyed
rings,
by it. Just
this is
thinking about
real.
what we need to do.
Now,
Aha, just
can
the
you give me
regular
an
boring
example of
stuff
a- I
again.
cannot
You
believe
know,
this.
I hate to
Human
say
condition
this,
in black and
but I
white.
long for the good old
Okay,
days.
if I'm crazy,
Oh, you
I
mean the
might as
days
well
when
go
we
all
were
the
dodging
way.
away for our lives,
Diane.
fighting
Can I actually
Akatsuki and
reverse
Moa,
time?
as well as what was left of his
Why
plans
Argus?
and also the deceased
Because of her
Gingeriki that
images of
Manako of
hopeless
Anut
faces.
brought
You feel like
back to
totally
life,
haunted by the
as well as that army of cloned creeps named Zetsu.
I better rewind.
If I were to recall, you were always telling me not to be so reckless with our lives. Since when do you want those days back all of a sudden? At least those old days
did
were
it.
not boring,
I
brat.
actually
All
did
we've
it.
been doing so
Photographer
far
who
is
perfectly
foiling
captured
robberies and the
Human
like.
time machine.
Pure crap assignments. If you want to
Anybody?
hear me comment about it, though,
Max,
at least this world
don't
we're
freak
in has
out.
promise,
Not
and
yet.
I'm not going to be dealing
Victoria?
with those blasted
Why Argus?
Uchiha again.
because of her
So,
together,
images of
Max.
what is going on right now
You
in
feel
this
like
place
totally
you
haunted
call
by
your
the eyes
brain?
of those sad mothers.
Tell
I
me
took
now so I
myself
can
eat
get some
Jefferson
blasted
Avenue
sleep
question.
already, Narrat told the
If he does
Kayabi.
again, I'll
And
know
after
this
a
is
while,
real.
the Kayabi
Keep
replied,
that to yourself.
so that's the reason you've been
Seriously,
making
though,
such a mental
I could
racket.
frame any one of
Please,
you in a dark
you've
corner
done worse before.
capture you
Living
in a
on the
moment of
move in this
desperation.
city should be enough.
And
Stay
any
in
one of
one
you could
place
do
and
that.
then
If
move
anybody
around
else
and
looked
doing
at
odd
this,
jobs
what
here
would
and
they
there should cover
think?
it. Easy for you to say. You don't have a lot to deal with in your own mind. And stop peering into my memories, Kayabi. Or else I am going to tighten that cage again. Ha, at least you've grown a very good pair. Tell you what, why don't we go and get drunk and have a lot of fun? From what I have seen, this city's got some interesting stuff to look at and experience, especially the female company. Oh, sure, go out and get drunk and get laid. That seems to be an answer you would come up. I swear you're like the pervy sage at times. It's a start, and besides, with my healing of you, your bloodline, and that senjutsu you've been working with for decades, you're going to be fine. Haha, we have to worry about how we're going to live here, Kayabi. That stuff can wait. I was thinking of being a sort of traveling writer. Might work. And what pretel are you going to be writing about? My travels, people, places I've seen, battles I've fought in, that sort of thing. I might even try my hand at doing those novels the pervy sage cooked up here in this world like what I did back in the old one. HMP. Do what you like, brat. But I sure as hell hope we get to see some action soon. I am getting really annoyed that we only have to deal with such small fry. If there is nothing else, I am going back to bloody sleep. Night then, furball. Same to you, shrimp. As soon as that conversation was over, Na began to think about that idea. Writing was something he had done a lot of times, and he had plenty to write about. He could try it out and at least see if he could earn money out of it. But he still needed some things to do that. He usually relied only on an empty book and his supply of pens and his imagination, but this world had a number of very interesting things that he felt he could use to his advantage. It was going to be something that he was going to have to take in consideration, but for now, a good night's sleep could do him a world of good. After cleaning up the place and making sure to secure his home from anyone who might come in, he got some much-needed shutye. Tomorrow, he was going to do some major shopping and also possibly win some more money in either a few odd jobs or in a lottery. And when that happens, he was going to get to work, 4 weeks later. Jimmy Olsen was usually the kind of guy who was working around the clock in the Daily Planet, namely when it came to pictures and articles that were of great interest, since he wanted to be a photographer and one of the best in the Daily Planet as well. But right now, he was checking out this recently circulated short novel that was becoming something of a hit with some of the younger members of the newspaper.
To me,
The young man had to admit as he read the story
Isn't
that
that
it
too
was
easy?
interesting, and more than once,
Too obvious?
he could not help but shake his head as
what
well
if Arbus
as
chose to capture
blush.
people at the height
Man,
of
whoever
their
came
beauty
up
or
with this is
innocence?
either a guy with a very
She had a
vibrant
brilliant eye.
imagination or one hell of a pervert.
She could have
He
taken
was so
another
engrossed
approach.
in reading the book that he was
I
not
have to
aware that
admit,
there were two
I'm not
people
a big
coming in
fan of her
behind him.
work.
Still the same
Thus,
stupid
it was
picture.
not surprising that he was
So
surprised when the
everything
book
seemed the
was
same as
taken from
before.
him. Hey,
He
you know
captured the
better than to
essence
be
of
reading on the
post-war
job.
beat America.
Jimmy,
And it was
the
the
young
same
man
stupid
gulped as he
picture.
recognized the voice as
So
Lois
everything
Lane,
seems the
and
same
sure
as
enough,
before.
he was right as he
You
saw
don't
that
have
it was
beauty
indeed
without a
Lois
beat.
Lane with Clark nearby
Which
as well.
explains why Frank was Kerouac's photographic
Sorry about
muse.
that. I'm
My
just
pencil
reading
case
the
is
story
still on the
halfway
same
now.
place.
Lois read
Well,
some of the book's contents,
We've all
and she
seen
raised an
that
eyebrow at this
iconic
and
shot
looked
of
at Jimmy.
Kerouac on the balcony.
Where
And
exactly
if you
did you
haven't,
get this?
shame.
I bought it in a
Capturing the
bookstore.
romantic
It was
earth
recently released from Los Angeles and made by a
and
writer
solitude
there.
of the 20th century
Someone
poet.
calling himself Sage Thompson or
He did.
something like that. For a guy who writes stories like that, he's not too bad, though not as good as you, Lois. The dark-haired female reporter shook her head and replied, "This guy's different. I'll give him that. But while he might stir a man's ego with some of this, I still don't have a liking for what I have read so far. Though he does have a rather extensive imagination. You mind if I take a look at this book, Lois?" Lois raised an eyebrow at that and replied, "You sure about that idea of reading this book yourself, Smallville? The stuff I just read might not be good to you." Clark smiled a bit and replied, "It'll be fine, Lois. I am a full-grown man after all." Clark looked the book over as soon as Lois handed him the book, and when he read some of it, he could not help but raise his own eyebrows. The two waited until he replied, though he could not help but have a slight shaking of the head as he spoke. "He's got a vivid imagination. All right, still, it's not too bad, at least compared to some of the things I have heard about. Right, anyway, we've got a story to cover. Make sure Perry does not see you with this, Jimmy." As the two left, Jimmy took the book and hid it away, and he wondered just who this guy was.
Now,
He was not very famous and was not that recognized, but the fact that he had this story made and published meant that he had some clout, no matter how small. He then got
I
back to
can't
reading and
stretch
couldn't
time
help but
anymore.
get back into the swing of things. If he ever met this guy, he was going to ask just where all this
Anybody?
came from, since, despite coming close to being called, it had a good story. Unknown to him, Karma now
Anybody?
yawned a bit as he headed off the roof of the train he
Bueller?
was riding on and was
Diane
soon in the
Arbus.
trees.
there you go,
As soon as he
Victoria.
was in the
Why
clear,
Arbus?
he continued the rest
Because
of the
of her
trip in his
images of
own
hopeless
fashion.
faces.
His
You
new
feel like totally
destination was
haunted by
still
the
a
eyes of
day
those
or
sad
so
mothers
away,
and children.
but he was going ahead to make sure that he had plenty of time to spare. This place in question was interesting to him, and exploring the
Anybody?
outside world was going to be interesting to him.
Bueller?
Apart
Diane
from wearing a
Arbus.
new set of
There you
clothes,
go,
he
Victoria.
now had a
Why
backpack
Arbus?
carrying a laptop, several
of her
portable
images
and
of hopeless
rechargeable
faces.
batteries, a wireless internet drive connection device, and a few devices called
You
USBs.
feel like totally haunted.
These had his files, and after spending a week poring through computer manuals and practice, he was able to make good use of it. He had won enough money to buy what he felt was a good and durable laptop and went to get the rest of the devices he now had and worked on a short story that had him in IT, though with a different name, along with his late wife Hinata, who had a different name as well. It was actually based on a mission they did together when they were not yet married and what they did afterwards. He grinned to himself as he recalled how surprised he was when he discovered the wild side of the normally gentle and kind-hearted Hugo Aries. Hinata was not too wild, but still it had very interesting results either way. That was his first story, and thankfully it was enough to get him paid a good amount, though the books were limited, as he had found a publisher who was willing to take the challenge and accepted the fact that he was a traveling writer. They agreed that he would send them stories via the net when on the move or when he was there in the area. And while it was odd to be sure, He was happy that the man agreed to it anyway. For now, he was on his way to see the next city and had to admit that it had the promise of being entertaining. That place was none other than Metropolis itself. To be continued. Author's notes. I decided to update this a bit before going to my other stories since this has gotten quite a lot of interest. I will be working on my NWNLOTR story soon enough and the others I have mentioned as well. Well, now that takes care of this chapter. And while this is not too long or too short and not filled with action-packed battle scenes and the like, I like it.
So surreal.
The reason for this chapter is that I want Naruto to be a lot more settled before he takes a more active role in the hero community.
Okay.
On the next chapter, we would have him meet with some of the more recognized heroes, and that would be Superman himself along with those that Superman knows and sees as his allies and friends. That being none other than Supergirl, Steel, and Lois Lane. Is there a chance that Na would try and flirt with either Supergirl or Lois Lane or even both? Maybe he is a guy and he will be interested as both Lois Lane and Kara are very attractive and he is not the kind to ignore women. Though naturally he will not be too open about it and he will keep it to himself and be friendly about it. The last thing he wants to do is get on Superman's bad side when it comes to women. Naturally he will soon figure out that Clark Kent is Superman and Kara is Supergirl due to his training in them. Or besides though he will make sure to keep that to himself. How well that will be up to me to play out now, won't it? Now on a topic that has apparently gotten a lot of interest.
Look at this crap.
My plans for
How can I show
Naruto's
this to Mr.
relationships which
Jefferson?
as I have placed will be on
I
the
can hear
H
the
route.
class laughing at me
Several
now.
reviewers have given me a bit of a debate on this route and they have given me very solid and respectable arguments. They stated that the idea of Na being in a Harem relationship with the DC ladies is not a good idea and would be considered wrong and also out of character.
I have to admit,
And they do have a
I'm not a
point as the
big
women
fan
of
of
the
her work.
Justice League, whether the comics of the
prefer
cartoon series as
Robert
well as
Frank.
the movies are not the kind of people who would like to be in a situation like that. Now I have talked to them and explained that I have plans myself to make it possible. But for the benefit of those who are possibly asking the same questions, I will state that not all her stories and anime always end in the guy of the story having all the ladies. There was one anime that had the young man being joined by a number of women who were actually teachers in his class and they were there in their own words to be his mothers. Now before anyone here starts getting age-related ideas to this anime, the women did become like mothers to him and they helped him overcome many trials related to regular life and school life. Another series is a personal favorite of mine and this Vandre since despite Habuki being chased by Dar Misty and Jura for different reasons, he eventually ended up with Dar and in the novel for the anime they had a daughter.
I did know.
Harem fanfiction might
I
get some
kinda
odd marks
forgot.
from some readers and for good reason, but to me it all boils down to the writer. Does the writer take the time to
Louis
make the
Daguerre was a
relationships
French
with each
painter who
female
created
character
daguerreotypes,
involved in the harem more
a
robust,
process that gave
well thought
portraits
out
a
and
sharp
developed?
reflective style like
That
a
is the
mirror.
key question
Now
in
you're
any story
totally
that has a
stepping in for a
male-female
zone.
relationship.
Sad face.
Does the relationship grow and
Very
become
good, Victoria.
something better? And
The
does it
Daguerrean
have the right
process
plot points to
brought out
reach
fine
the point
detail
for
in
the
people's
two
faces,
involved to be an official
making them
couple?
extremely popular from
Now
the
one
1800s
fanfiction
onward.
that has in my
The
mind
first
won the
American
girl is
daguerreotype
Hung Tech
self-portrait
Dread
was
since
done by
Slade
Robert
Ranma's
Cornelius.
relationships with Data, Jura and MIA
find
had
out
been
all
properly
about
developed and thus the
in your
three were
textbook
more than willing
or
to
I
be with
haven't
the
kept
man
up
they
with my
loved and
journal
share
as much
him
as I
because the
should.
respective relationships in the story
Guys,
had
don't
been
forget the deadline to submit a
and given
photo in the
plenty
Everyday
of time
Heroes
to develop.
contest. I'll fly
They
out with the
worked
winner to
out
San
and have reached
Francisco,
the
where
point
you'll
that
be
they are
feted
more
by
than
the art
acceptable.
world. It's great exposure,
Naturally,
and it can
in the
kickstart a
case of
career in
Shippuden and
photography. So
Yukio's
Stella
relationships
and
with
Alyssa
Slade
did it
Ranma,
together.
it had
Taylor,
reached the point that they were
don't
assured
hide.
that though they
I'm
had
still
not
waiting for
won
your entry
Slade's
too, and yes,
affections
Max,
the way they
I
were.
see you pretending not to see.
NTED, they were still important to him and they remained in very good terms with the Tekken. The same will go for Naruto in my story. In simple terms, Naruto will be spending time with the women who
Victoria
he might
doesn't
be
waste
with
a
and
second
depending on
kissing
how the
ass.
time is spent, then that will determine if the
I
relationship
should have known.
will
She'll
reach a
have better
point that the
equipment
woman
than
in question
Blackwell.
and Naruto become more than friends or remain as friends. Along the way, the women will also be able to talk to one another and eventually depending on how their own relationship with one another, it will be seen if they're alright with the idea of shush. Eyeing Naruto or not, I hope that this will explain my stance on Naruto having a harem route. Naruto will not get
Victoria
all of
has
them
to
women
have the
like that.
bestest,
He
newest,
will
most
spend time with
expensive
them and develop
everything.
his relationships and thus the number might be rather small in
I
this
should have
case and
known.
also will be
She'll have
deeper
better
than just
equipment than
5.
Blackwell.
Sickle attraction. Some will be merely friends and they're on good terms with one another while the ones that have reached that point and become the ones that Naruto will be intimate with and where they do not mind being with him. That means in simple terms that Naruto will not have a harem just to have them. He will develop his relationships and take the time to know them all. And in doing so, he will show that while he had been in a marriage with more than one woman, he is not someone who does it for kicks. Besides, I will also be looking for possible loopholes that I can use to make it possible. Those loopholes will take time for me to find and also determine if it indeed can be viable for my needs and for the story itself. And do not forget that I have already made clear that some women will indeed be off limits, as I plan to have the recognized relationships in the series remain that way. Na will flirt with them, but in a friendly fashion, as well as he has
I need to go
respect
to
for
my
the
room
guys
and
who are in
return
the
Ward's
eyes and
flash
minds
drive.
of the said women. Na whistled a bit as he was now looking at the outskirts of the city. He had gotten out of the woods after a while and was now there in front of the first city in his plan to see this world on a more personal level. So this is Metropolis. Ha! Not as big as La, but certainly a good sight. The blonde Hokage was very interested to see the world and the cities, namely those with recognized heroes, since he wanted to see what they were like in the flesh. He felt that one can only learn so much from magazines, rumor mills, and newspapers, and meeting observing the people in question was a more complete way of understanding them. He still had his gear and weapons hidden in some scrolls should he need them. And at least he had his laptop to boot. And he was very keen on the idea on making sure to meet the heroes who resided here. He was already aware of Superman, but he was also aware that there were others in the city as well. He was aware of the one known as Steel and the other being Superman's cousin, the one named Supergirl, who he had to admit was rather good looking and would have really gotten the attention of guys who were around his physical age and not his actual age. Not to mention the attention of his godfather. He placed that aside, however, and decided to go into the city, but not before making a few changes to himself. He took to the direction of a nearby car stop and grabbed something to eat and then do the changes, then head into the city and go to his work. Besides, he might pick up some brand new ideas to add to his creations. All the while, he decided to work on that idea of him making an autobiography of himself and make a story out of it. He had no idea on how this might play out, but as he had learned very early in life, there was a first time for everything, and this might pan out well in the end. In Metropolis. Not too bad. Naruto stated to himself as he walked through the city, as he was now disguised with his hair now deep brown, and he placed on some contact lenses to change his eye color and also had a hengi on to hide his whisker marks. He was now moving on with the rest of the city crowd and wanting to see just what this place was. He did have some prior reading on the city and knew that this was going to be an interesting area, considering that a good number of people reside here. Not to mention the fact that this was also the home turf of Superman, his cousin Steel, and a few others. He was not sure what he was going to do when he would meet them in person, but he was going to have to prepare himself for anything that might happen while he was there. As he moved through the streets, he also made sure to keep his eyes and ears open, as well as his battle-hardened senses for anything that might happen around him. The city was well known for having quite a number of more than interesting criminals, and he had yet to meet them. Most of the time, he had to deal with the garden variety crooks and criminals, as the KAB Snidley called them, and thought that they were small fry compared to the criminal lords, ninjas, and more that he and the blonde Jinchuriki had dealt with in their time together. And to some point, Naruto had to agree. He was very curious what sort of high-powered criminals were there in this world that he would have to watch out for. He soon arrived at one of the most recognized places in the city, and that was none other than the Daily Planet. He had to admit that it was impressive by the standards of buildings back in Konoha, but he was not going to try and compare it for now. However, he decided to go and grab a newspaper and see just what was on the news on this side of the world. He spotted a newspaper boy and asked for one and paid the guy with some of his money and cracked open the news to see what would be there on the pages. One topic had to do with the actions of several countries on a variety of matters. Another dealt with some new action by some celebrity or another, the actions of another company, though in the case of Metropolis, there was only LexCorp in the spotlight. There was mention of Superman doing some more good deeds, though there was some dissent towards the hero that was there for Udo to read. The former Hokage could not help but notice that in his picture the man had stress lines on his face, and he could relate as despite his youthful appearance he felt the arrival of the said lines on his face when he was doing his job as Hokage. No doubt the guy was working his butt off to try and redeem his name, and Naruto had no problem with that, as he expected it from the man. He looked at the rest of the newspaper, and when he was getting tired of reading it, he decided to store away the newspaper in his backpack and moved on to see what else was going to happen. He stopped, however, when he spotted a number of people coming out of the tall building there. One of them appeared to be a dark-haired and blue-eyed woman who wore a white skirt and a business-style top in light blue-violet color, and no doubt wore a second type of shirt underneath. The other was a guy with wide shoulders, tall to boot, and while the suit made him look normal, Naruto was willing to bet that underneath said
must have
suit,
missed
the guy
something.
was seriously well
I
built.
should rewind.
The glasses might also give him a look that showed he was harmless. But the last person he knew who wore glasses was not in any way, shape, or form harmless. The woman was very attractive in his mind, and no doubt if he was still alive, his perverted godfather Jiraiya would already be making his move on her, and he would admit the same thing. But judging from the way the woman was with the man and how the man was
I
close
can't
to the
rewind
woman,
anymore.
that told him that he would not approve.
Sorry.
Not to
no
mention that the
paparazzi
way the
allowed.
woman moved showed that she was skilled in defending herself. Not to the level of facing highly trained assassins yet, but close enough to handle the odd thug and overconfident fellow with leerous intentions. The guy, on the other hand, sent warning bells in his head as he felt
Okay,
his danger
let's see if
senses
this
warn him
works.
even more that this guy was not to be trifled with, thou. He was not evil looking in the slightest. But for some oddball reason, he looked somewhat familiar to him. Why is it I get the feeling I know that guy? Na decided to try and get an image of the man and headed to a nearby camera store and decided to get a disposable camera, namely the kind that had no flash and would be easy to use. He was not sure what to make of these cameras, as they were a load more advanced than the ones he had seen back home. But after a while, he decided not to bother with the details on operation and focused on
They
use.
have to be right
He
under
then
the
began to
bucket.
follow the group to see what was it about the guy that was making his ninja senses go on the alert and giving him the message that he was no ordinary person. He moved at the other side, making sure to keep himself controlled and invisible, and it seemed to work a good
I
deal.
need to figure this out.
That is until the group got into a taxi and were now on their way somewhere in the
Close, but
city.
no cigar.
He could
They
have
have to
gone
be
after them
right
on foot,
under the
but
bucket.
doing that was not an option. Na decided that now was the time to go up to the air. He moved a bit further and entered an alleyway, making sure that he was alone and no one was around to see him. Seeing that he was indeed alone, he quickly changed into his normal gear for ninja
Close,
work
but
and
no
also got a
cigar.
bottle of water
They
out
have
to
to be
wash out the
right
hair
under
dye
the
to
bucket.
return his hair to its natural blonde state.
Thanks
With that
so
out of the
much,
way,
Ramos, for ruining
he
my
quickly
outfit.
moved on the walls with chakra on his feet and moved to the roof. As he got there, he decided to switch to sage mode and focused on the dark-haired woman instead of the
I
man.
missed something.
He had no idea
better
if the man
rewind.
had the ability to sense him being tracked via chakra, since no one in this world seemed to use, let alone know of chakra the way he did. But no sense taking risky gambits this early. But the very second he was able to sense chakra, he was quite surprised to sense that man's chakra. It was not human in a very real sense, and he knew that as compared to the chakra of the people around him. Along with the man in that car, the man's was denser to a level and also had a strange feel to it, almost like it was not part of the natural flow of chakra in a person, and he sensed that it was near cage level chakra, or that of
I
a
don't wanna mess with
Genchuriki
that
tapping
ladder and
into
hurt
the
poor
initial
Samuel.
stage of the tailed
I
form.
just want to get
Summerthy.
Victoria the hell out of the
NG
way.
he knew very well. He got up and decided to follow the signature, but not before deploying 2 cage bush that remained behind and gather more chakra for him to use. The nature energy here was a bit dull due to the modernization of the
Okay,
place,
let's see if
but not
this
that bad to
works.
others. It took a while for him to follow the car as he used his cane with the wire to move from building to building while using his chakra, which was channeled to his feet
Keep
to hold
walking,
onto the
hippie.
walls, and using his senses in sage mode to follow the car until it reached its destination
Victoria
and
is
at
not
least it
getting
was
my hand.
near some docks. That allowed him to try and get a better vantage point, and where he quickly returned to using hench. Only this time he took
Sorry,
the appearance of
no
one of the many
paparazzi
dock
allowed.
workers while making sure to change his hair color a bit with some chakra application. He made sure to keep himself cool and calm as he tracked the trio, and they were
Close,
soon
but no
before a
cigar.
man who Naruto
They have
guessed
to
was
be
the one
right
they came
under
to
the
see.
bucket.
He watched them carefully, silently hoping that he was going to
so
find
much,
out
Ramos,
just
for
who the
ruining
big
my
guy
outfit.
was. And as soon as the man began to take notes and speak his turn, he waited for what he had no idea. And as soon as the interview was over, the blonde noted him place his arms on his chest in a cross pattern as he seemed to
Close,
smile
but
at
no
something.
cigar.
They
As
have
the
to
two
be
who were
right
with him were
under the
rather
bucket.
animated in the discussion, he decided to take a shot at it and took a
Thanks
picture
so
of the
much for
man.
almost ruining my
Once he
outfit.
did so, he decided to try
You're so
another
lucky that didn't
experiment
fall
and
on
headed
us.
towards
We'd
the
see your
trio.
ass so fast.
He knew that he had to time it right and make it look like an accident as he took
Think,
out some
Max.
of his loose change from
Rewind
his
and find
pocket.
something.
He then dropped the coins down and made sure that some of the change rolled to the direction of the people in question. He then spoke out as the coins stopped before the trio. Damn it, they rolled out of my pockets again. That worked as the man he had been looking at and observing moved to his knees to help get the coins and spoke to him as soon as he got up and offered the coins to him. Here you go. I think it's better that you have a wallet on hand next time. Nar smiled a bit at that and replied as normally as he could manage. He gave a sheepish grin and scratched the back of his head as he pocketed his coins and spoke. Sorry about that. I was a bit of a butterfingers with coins growing up. My name's Curtis. Curtis Riley. New here in the docks. You are. Hello then, Curtis. The name is Clark. Clark Kent from Smallville.
Do you understand
Nar raised an
English?
eyebrow at that, though he
Get
did
lost.
that very slowly. Smallville. There's a place with that kind of name. Better focus on the mission of finding out more of this guy. Nice to meet, yelled Clark. Anyway, you happen to be a reporter, I take it. Yeah. From the Daily Planet. And so are my friends here. Meet Lois Lane. Nar looked at Lois Lane and mentally whistled at the way she looked, which was definitely a looker with the dark hair, well-featured face, and eyes. Not to mention the figure to boot. He extended his hand, and she shook his hand as well. In that moment, he was able to tell that despite her being a beauty, this lady had some strong muscle tone, and with his battle-hardened senses could tell that she had combat training, possibly
That's the
self-defense.
first and last time
He decided
I
to
expect hear
keep his
that.
normal persona under wraps and just stick to the persona he developed when in hench. Good to meet you, Miss Lane. Same to you, Curtis. You fuller part-time supposed to be signing off today anyway. Lois nodded, and that was when Clark introduced the orange-haired and freckle-faced guy next to them. And this is Jimmy Olsen, 1 hour photographers in the Daily Planet. Nar looked at the guy and saw that he was fresh-faced, eager, dedicated, and also very energetic, reminded him slightly of himself. When he was still younger. It made him grin in his usual fashion and spoke to Jimmy. Nice to meet ya, Jimmy. Likewise, I am also one of the best photographers in the planet. You can ask both Clark and Lois. I worked with them a long time. I see. Anyway, I have to get a move on. Don't want my bosses to be thinking I was slacking off. As soon as he left them, Narrat kept himself focused on getting away from them without raising any alarm bells. And it was not long before he was in the clear. He sighed a bit and removed the hench. But that was when he heard a massive explosion happening in the same docks and felt the explosion as well. He looked to see what was going on and it seemed that the dock workers had an accident and he looked carefully to see the people there moving around in different directions. Some ran away, others moved in to see what was going on, and other moved in to help. That was when he noted that
Okay,
Clark had
let's see if
disappeared
this
from
works.
Lois and Jimmy. He raised an eyebrow at that and then spotted none other than Superman. He kept himself hidden as best he could and calm as he watched the Man of Steel as he was called in saving the people who were in the area of the detonation. Once that was done and the fire department came, he saw Superman talking to the dock workers on what happened and he was in a pose that he recognized easily with the stoic but calm and relaxed look. Nar took the picture of that and soon left. Hours later, man, feels good to be on a bed. Nar said as he was now resting in a hotel that he managed to pay for with his funds from being a writer, and he was soon going to have room service brought up for dinner an hour or so later. It annoyed him that they did not have ramen, but decided to try other food as well to
Close,
see
but no
how it would
cigar.
fare.
They have to be
For now,
right under the
however,
bucket.
some rest was in order as well as a meal. He dozed off for at least an hour or so, as he had gone off to have the pictures developed and soon paid for them and got to the telephone. He had only dozed off for an hour or so before he heard the
must
doorbell
have
and the
missed
call room
something.
service.
I should
Naruto
rewind.
woke up quickly and headed to the door and opened it to let the man walk in with a tray. It still amazed him that a guy could actually come here and order food and drink in the comfort of our own room. Sure, he had food in his own place and could ask a Yame and the ones she and her father hired at times for food deliveries come to the Hokage residence, but this was different either way since he did not have to pay a large amount for it. He however placed that aside and began to eat the food once
Okay,
it was on
let's
his
see if
table.
this works.
The food comprised of salmon,
Keep walking,
sashimi,
hippie.
roasted beef, hot potatoes, and rice balls along with a picture of cold tea.
Victoria
The
is
food
not
was custom
hitting my
ordered
hand.
by him, and since he was going to be in here in Metropolis, he was going to make
Do
the
you
most of it.
understand English?
He was happy that he had
Get
gotten a
lost.
lot of money to stay in the hotel for a week and a half. Once he was done eating, he decided to get to work and see what was it that made him think that this Clark Kent was hiding something about himself. He got the pictures he had and also began with the picture of Clark. He took out a scroll he had hidden and called out a Kani. He then channeled a bit of his wind chakra to increase the cutting power. He had to be careful though, since overdoing it might cut through the table and even the floor. And the last thing he wanted was to explain to the people who owned the place why one of their tables was cut in half or worse. Once he was done with what he had in mind, he made his next move. And there he made a very interesting discovery. Well, now this is a surprise. Na looked at the image before him and smirked slightly.
Close, but no
He had
cigar.
taken the newly
They have to
acquired
be
picture
right
of
under
Superman
the
that he had
bucket.
from the docks only hours before and had placed the cutouts of the
Thanks
man
so
he had
much for
pictured
almost
on the
ruining
image
my
of
outfit.
Superman, namely the
You're
suit,
so lucky
shoes,
that didn't
and
fall on us.
glasses.
We'd see your
Minus
ass
the
so
eyes.
fast.
And when he looked at the image, he could not help but see the
There's
similarities.
only one way around
And
this.
what he sensed from his use of senjutsu only served to convince him further. He decided for now to place the discovery
You're
he
so
made
lucky
aside
that
as he
didn't
then
fall on us.
decided to
We'd
destroy
see
the
your ass
images.
so fast.
Clark Kent was Superman and apparently was working in that place
Damn,
called the
I
Daily
missed
Planet
something.
as a cover.
I better
And he could
rewind.
not help but shake his head at how no one but him had figured out the true identity of the hero of Metropolis. Then again, if one were to look at Clark, despite the size and build, he looked like a guy who got beaten on for his lunch money on a regular basis. He should know, since he used to get hit a lot by bullies as a kid before he developed a reputation as prankster without equal and also developed his
None shall pass.
a jutsu skills. As he took the images, he decided to rely on his wind chakra to slice the pictures into nothing but bite-sized chunks and stuff them into the trash bin. He could have gone for fire chakra, but that would have triggered the fire alarms, and he was not in the mood for
Okay,
that to
let's see
happen.
if this works.
He then took a shower, and when he was done with the said shower, he got back into the room and opened the curtains to see the city and admitted that it looked nice at night. Once that was done, he decided to open up his laptop and begin to write his stories, connecting his portable internet USB drive. And getting to work as it was time to earn another internet paycheck. In the meantime, he was going to do something in Metropolis to get feel of the place and also see if he could see Superman in
hell?
action, as well as
Are you
learn more
kidding?
of him to see
Look
just
at this.
what
Chill,
sort of
Victoria.
guy he was
Just
underneath
water.
the cape.
Yeah.
Water
on my
The next
cashmere.
day,
Do
Na
you
was
know
up
how
and
much
about
this
early in the
fucking
morning
outfit
and
costs?
decided
You
to
look
call the desk
great.
that he
I
planned to
can't
go
even chill
outside
on the
early and
steps.
have his room locked down until he got back. He had spent at least 6 hours on his latest work as Sage Thompson and also began to send the drafts for his own comp. I see. He made it up as a way to chronicle his own life and decided to use his first name as the title of the comic and the character, and using the name Masashi Kosumoto as his pen name for this side of the deck. It was a name that seemed right to him, and he
Get the
went to
hell away
work in
from me,
making the
weirdo.
history of he place that he had grown up on Japan and
Hold
had
on,
learned
hold
about
on.
anime
We'll get
and
some
manga
towels.
and
We'll be right
wanted to
back.
make his own
So move your
series
ass
that could be
before I
accepted
drive.
in Western audience
It
groups.
worked.
That
Don't
was
mess
why
with
he also
Max,
decided that
bitches.
when he had the chance he was going to learn how to draw manga, and since he had good enough memories of his fellow ninja and the people in the elemental nations, allies and enemies, he could draw them. It was just a try and he was not sure how effective it was, but no sense not trying something new every now and then.
Hey, Victoria.
He
What
also
do you
recalled
want,
that it was the
Max?
way that Jera made the book that shaped his life and that of Nagato, who he found out later in life was one of his fellow clansmen in the Uzumaki Sid.
Don't.
Of things, and
Don't
he
say
hoped
a
had
word,
found
Max.
peace
Wait,
in the
hold that
afterlife
pose.
alongside his family and friends. If he could make a story about the
And
life
no
he
filter
lived that
needed
could
before I
inspire
post
others
this.
as that book Jerry made inspired others, then why
No,
not
please
do it?
move. I've had a messed
Besides,
up day and
if
I'm
he
going
had to
to
do
my
book
room.
signing,
You do that?
there was always
I
Hench.
know where you live.
Once he was done
So
with that
does
and
Nathan.
saved the files, he left the hotel and carried
Maybe
a
I
special
shouldn't have
note in
done
his
that.
pockets. Once
Now
he
I have to
felt
get
that
to
he
my
was in the
room,
clear,
then see
he
Warren.
moved to an alleyway and out of sight of anyone else. He then decided to get decked out in his regular clothes and see the city the only way he liked. He quickly climbed up the nearby wall and tossed out his kanai to the next building and began to move around the city, sampling the sights and already seeing the first rays of sunlight coming up to cover the city. And as he moved from place to place, he looked down to see how the people were, and they were acting like the people he had seen back there in LA. Some moved about to do the daily chores. Other went to work. Some wandered about and enjoying the day. And naturally, when he moved over them in his outfit and mask, they were soon reacting, though in a way that he did not expect as they spoke out. Look up in the sky. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's. I have no idea what or who that is. There were people looking up at him as he moved over the city using his cane with the wire and on occasion his own chakra chains, and he wagered a guess this was how Superman
sad.
would be known,
I didn't write
seeing as
anything.
this was the man's
I have
home.
nothing to say.
City. And he found the lines rather amusing to boot. As he moved over the ropes and swinging away like a maniac,
Home sweet
he stopped
home,
over at the
my
Daily
favorite
Planet and
cocoon.
figured he could move around to say hi as it were. ... In Perry's office, Perry was currently discussing some matters pertaining to the incident yesterday with his reporters. And naturally, two of his
I look
best,
so
Lois
pathetic.
Lane and Clark Kent, were there along with
I
the
am
others.
so addicted to this
He was
site.
eager to see if they
Look
could
at these
find some
vintage
news about
porn makes
Superman
me
and
laugh.
see if they could help change the
It's
image
nice to
he had
feel
on
like I already
him,
made a real
and they had
friend
good
here.
reason to do so. Perry held Superman in high regard and wanted to try and help him recover the trust of the people. And while he knew that Superman was doing an admirable job already in trying to clear his name, it was far from easy. Not many people were willing to forgive Superman for being used to invade their world by Darkseid, even though it had already been known that
Max and
Superman
Chloe,
had been
best
brainwashed
friends
and was
forever. Who even
OT
says that
himself.
anymore?
All right,
I'm going
where
to
do
have
we
to call
stand with
Chloe eventually
Superman?
and find out
One
what she'll
spoke.
say.
Still all
The
right,
longer I wait, the
Chief,
worse it'll
but not
be.
everyone in Metropolis is going to let it go. I know that, but we know that he's been working his butt off to clear his name, and I can even see the lines on his face, and I don't leave the office untie. L5. We could at the very least help him out so he does not have to go all out. Unknown to Perry, Clark was smiling as he knew that at least here in his workplace, he had a good number of supporters, Lois being one of them, which helped him deal with a lot of things. Part of him wanted to tell her the truth that he and Superman were the same.
Cartier-Bresson,
But if
Renault,
experience was anything to
Hamilton,
go by,
the
if she
greatest.
knew who he really was, and others found out about it, they would be gunning after her in no time flat. And he was not in the mood for them to attack the woman he happened to be very much attracted to. Lois turned and noted the smile on Clark's face and smiled a bit as she nudged him gently on the ribs. You okay there, Smallville? Clark turned and nodded a bit while smiling. Yeah, I am fine. Just thinking about how Superman must feel to have supporters here in the planet. Yeah, he's done a lot for the city and the people. So, he does deserve to have allies here, right? Plus, he's not lied before
The
to
Max
anyone either,
Caulfield Photo
so we won't lie
Memorial
about
Wall.
him. Not like the other news stations have been doing lately. Before anyone could say anything, though, one of the staff came into the office and shouted out, "Chief, we got news." The assembled reporters turned and Perry spoke next. What's going on? We've heard that some of the people in the streets
It's
have
not
seen a
exactly
guy
pretty
moving
and
around
pink,
the city
but
in the
no
air.
shits are given.
Who? That
I
was
like
when
my
another
wardrobe.
voice came on the scene
Would
outside the
Mandrake
window
call
of Perry's
themselves
office.
reporters?
That would be me, Dado. The assembled group of reporters and one disguised Kryptonian turned as one to the window, and there sure enough was the Hokage decked in full attire and crouching on the ledge and giving him a wave. He looked at Lois and seemed to smile at her and winked at the same time. That made Lois raise an eyebrow and a frown from Clark as Perry spoke to the man before them all who was disguised. You're the Hokage. What are you doing here in Metropolis? What? A guy can't take a tour of the cities every now and then just cause he wears a mask.
I'll
I
miss
won't
going
be
to the
here
games
long,
with my
so
dad.
don't worry. I ain't here to
Thunderbirds.
upstage Superman either. I am just here to see the city and the rest of the country. But if there's anything happening down there that ain't good, then I won't hesitate to help. CR. Na turned and then unleashed
You are
his chakra
thirsty.
chain, and the
I'm
energy
the
chain
worst.
soon got to a nearby building,
Drink up.
digging into the concrete, and off he went. T. Swinging away off to the rest of the city, leaving behind
If
a
I'm
group
not
of
looking
people
through a
who were
viewfinder,
surprised at the
I'm looking
appearance of
through
a
a
hero
window.
who was supposed to be
Always
based only in the La area. Clark had managed to see through the mask and was surprised to see that the Hokage was actually a teenager who looked to be least 17 or
One day I'll
younger,
organize
at
my
least
film
as far as
collection.
he was able to see.
One day I'll get an
In
actual
hindsight,
HD TV.
that made the Hokage not much older than Kara in a sense, and he decided to get a chance to talk to the youth,
Looks like Dana
but not
left me a
before
little
going to
post-it
get
note.
some help. He did appreciate the fact that the Hokage seemed to be the kind who helped others, but he was not going to take any chances too early until he knew the young man more. Already, the reporters moved out and the Daily Planet were on the move to see if they could track and pin down the Hokage and find OU.
Great. Now I have to go get
Just
the
what
flash
was the
drive
reason
from
he was
Dana's
here
room.
in Metropolis. They were not the only ones, however, as one certain corrupt but intelligent businessman, criminal mastermind, was also interested on what was going on now that his secretary had informed him of the sighting. This new hero was thought to have resided in there only, so why he was here was a very interesting thing. And after seeing the abilities of this being, looking him over was going to be something that would be possibly worth the time and investment. In the city, the blonde moved through the city with chakra chains and wired cani and then spotted what appeared to be a bunch of thugs robbing a bank in broad daylight, no less. He blown wondered just what was going through the minds of the criminals in Metropolis. They should already know that Superman called this place him. And from what he learned, the police here were top-notch when it counted. So why bother robbing the place when it was either going to be the cops or Superman and those with him that were going to come in and get you? Either they've gotten used to seeing him or they're thinking with all the things he's been doing, he is not going to be around. The blonde Gingery decided that now was the right time to at least halt this. And who knows, he might run into the heroes of the city in question later. He moved to the next building and once he used his chakra chain, quickly moved to where the bank was and quickly tossed out some wire and grabbed one of the crooks as he flew overhead. The guy cried out as he was yanked off of his feet and was soon finding himself hanging over the street tied up in wire over a street pole. The group of thugs below looked up and saw Naruto as he was crouching over the pole and looking at them. The same could be said for the police as they had been expecting Superman, Supergirl, or Steel to be here, not this guy in a mask. One of the thugs shouted and aimed a shotgun as Na quickly flicked his hand and out came a shuriken that lodged itself right in the front of the barrel as he V'd in, leaping at the man. The guy screamed like a little girl as Naruto knocked him down to the ground and was out like a light as the former Hokage made his move and rolled to land a solid rising sidekick to the head of one of the thugs, sending him to the side and out cold like his buddy. The other guy tried to attack him with a hidden knife, but Naruto quickly got out a kunai and used the ring on the handle to catch said knife and with some quick movements moved the blade away and disarmed the guy and then introduced an elbow charge into the guy's sternum. That sent the man down as Naruto quickly used the kunai he had to stab the guy next to him, but not in a fatal place as he nailed the guy to the wall. He turned to face the last robber, but that was handled well enough as the guy was now surrendering to the police. And for good reason, as three figures appeared nearby. Na could not help but whistle as he was now face to face with none other than Supergirl herself along with her cousin Superman. He had expected one of them to turn up when that bank robbery was going on, but not both of them at the same time. As far as he could see, the Man of Steel was a lot more imposing in person than in the pictures, though he noted some stress lines on his face, and he did not look as healthy as his other pictures did, though he had seen some fairly new ones. No doubt he had been working non-stop to repair his good name, and the effects were there for him to see. Na had to give this guy credit for that, and he smiled a bit underneath the mask he wore and gave them a wave. Well, now, nice to finally meet Superman and company. Sorry about the mess. It wasn't my best effort, but at least they did not get far. Superman sighed a bit as he and the two others landed, carried the thugs a bit and was slightly surprised at how fast they had been taken down.
Hey, Juliet.
She had heard of the Hokage in the news, but did not view it all that much as she believed that if you've seen one metahuman, you've seen them all, regardless of the powers. It was not that she was against them or anything, but she was used to meeting them a lot, so she was a bit used to it. Steel, on the other hand, was curious how this new guy got here and somehow avoided revealing himself to anyone until now. The guy looked to be all right, but Steel was not going to rely entirely on first impressions. Superman then stepped forward and spoke to the Hokage, and Naruto wondered just what was it that the man was going to talk to him about. How old are you, Hokage? That was something that Na was not expecting for a moment until he recalled something about
Juliet
Superman.
Mason.
Apparently, he had some form of powerful vision. Some rumors said that it allowed him to see through things. That was rumors. But if there was one thing Naruto knew to be true, sometimes rumors were a bit too close to the truth. Everyone thought that Renegan was a mutation and was not going to come back again the world, but it did in Nagato, Toby, and Moa. Everyone thought that the Jubi and the Sage were stories and they turned out to be true. So, if this guy had the ability to see through things, then he was not going to take a chance and think that it's not possible. Why are you asking Superman? Clark sighed a bit and spoke. You look to be around at least 16 or something. Shouldn't you be in school or something instead of risking your life? You should not doing these things as if it's a fantasy thing kids have in their heads. Naruto felt a tick rise to the side of his head at that comment. Sure, he looked young due to his bloodline, senjutsu training, and the Kyuubi's chakra, but being called,
Hey,
or
Juliet.
at the least implied as being a kid,
Oh,
was
yes,
a bit
Max.
too darn
I've
annoying
locked
for his
Dana in
liking.
the room because we're cool.
He would have found it funny and would have joked about it or laughed it off, but being called a kid as if he were
Juliet
SA
Watson,
newbie in
you be
fighting was
nice.
annoying to him.
I'm
He
flattered.
wasted no
I
time
didn't
and
even
got
think
into
you
the
knew my
face
name
of
at all.
Superman, surprising him.
Of course I do.
Steel and Supergirl
Thanks.
is not many
I
people
locked
would
Dana
do that
in
to him.
because she was sexting Zach,
And it
my
seemed that
boyfriend.
some of the people who had
Unbelievable.
cameras were also surprised and half expected the two heroes to get into a fight. What did you
How do
call
you
me?
know?
Something
Victoria
about the
Chase.
tone in the
You
Hoage's
know
voice
her.
told Clark
You
that he
could
had
say
taken
that.
offense to that, and
But
seeing the
why would
angry
Dana go
expression
after
through
your
the mask with
boyfriend?
the X-ray
According to
vision
Victoria,
confirmed it.
Dana would do anything
That was
to
enough
date a
information
quarterback.
to tell Clark that
According
he
to
should try to
Victoria.
talk to the young man and resolve this.
She saw
Before
the
it
sext.
got ugly.
And
Look,
Zachary won't
I
answer
didn't
his
want to
phone.
sound offensive
Once
to you
Dana
since
admits
I
it,
have
she can
seen
go.
you in action already
Straight
on
to
the
hell.
news from LA, but you're rather young to be doing this kind of thing. You can do a lot better things before you try taking into this kind of life.
I'm not
You
letting her
know.
out until she tells the
Na
truth.
then pointed to Supergirl and spoke seriously.
Leave me alone,
And she
Max.
isn't a bit
Get a
too
clue.
young for this line of
I'm
work.
not letting her out until she tells
Supergirl
the
was a bit
truth.
annoyed, or rather very annoyed at the guy pointing at her. Sure, she was rather young by Argonian terms, but she had already done her fair share of crime fighting and had
Hey,
even
Juliet.
helped
Is
in
everything
stopping
cool?
Darkseid's invasion
yes,
along
Max.
with stopping
I've
her
locked
cousin
Dana
when
in
he
the
was
room because we're
brainwashed and went
cool.
rogue. To be pointed at and called a kid by a new
Juliet
arrival was
Watson,
something
you be
she was not
nice.
too keen
I'm
on,
flattered.
and she made
I
that
didn't
clear
even
as she
think you knew
stomped
my
over
name
to
at
the
all.
blonde Hokage and spoke.
Of
Who
course
are
I
you
do.
calling a key?
Thanks.
D.
I locked
Buster.
Dana in
Na
because
was
she
not
was
too put
sexting
out
Zach,
as
my
being
boyfriend.
glared at by a rather attractive
Unbelievable.
blonde-haired and blue-eyed female in her choice of outfit
Would
was
Dana
not
do
too
that?
bad a thing.
According to Victoria,
And he could
Dana would do
understand the
anything
reaction
to date
as
a
he would have
quarterback.
reacted the same
According
way.
to Victoria.
But he was not going to let
Huh.
that stop him from
She saw
saying
the
his
sex.
piece.
And Zachary
He was no
won't answer
longer a
his
kid
phone.
and had more than
Once
enough
Dana
years
admits
to be
it,
as
she can
cranky
go.
and serious as he
Straight
wanted.
to hell.
You look to be around what? 16 or 17? 17's my age and I am no kid. I've been doing this for a while now, and I am
Answer,
no
you
slouch.
wuss.
Well, neither am I. And for your information, I am no kid. If there's anyone around here who's been getting on in the years, that would be me. Clark was curious about that as he looked once more at the young man whose mask he could see through with his X-ray vision. The guy looked to be around the age he had seen, though he noted some signs of experience. So maybe calling him a kid was a bit of a mistake, and he did show age on his whisked face. But he also noted that his eyes, which were deep blue, also spoke of something old and experienced. So maybe he might have jumped the gun, as it were. That was lost to Supergirl, who was not using her X-ray vision as she was still locked in a glaring match with Naruto, while Steel was looking on, trying to get a feel of the situation and possibly try to defuse it before it got worse. But before anything could happen, there was a large explosion off in the distance, and that got the attention of the group as Clark spoke. This will have to
That's
wait.
real nice,
We need to
Victoria.
go and find out
And
what
who the
just
hell
happened.
thinks I'm a
But
hipster?
Kara, now is not the time. We need to check this out. We can
Boom.
talk with
This is
Hokage
the
about
email
this
I
at a
need to
later
show
date.
Juliet.
Kara sighed
Now I have to
reluctantly
print
and
this
gave the
fast
blonde
and get the hell
shinobi
out
a
of
glare
here.
as she was soon joining her cousin as Clark turned to face Na. Listen, I can understand that you want to do this to help her be recognized, but you're still new to this kind of life, so try to live a normal life, okay? As the heroes left, Naruto glared at Clark. He knew the guy meant well, but if he had even the slightest idea of what he had been through, what he said was not going to count for much. Na had lived a life that would have made most young men and women who were just regular folks quake in their shoes, and had faced so many life or death situations that had he been a regular kid, as Superman had put it, he would have either been given an early funeral, sent to child services, or considered mentally unstable. Live a normal life. Ha, I'd rather not. Thank you very much. And I am not doing this to be recognized. At least not yet. Na was tempted
This
to
better
go ahead and
convince
let them
Juliet that
deal
Dana
with
is
whatever it
innocent.
was that got their attention away from him, but something was tagging his senses and telling him to go and see things through. Besides that, he was rather eager to see just how good Superman, Supergirl, and Steel were in action. Now, to see if these people, or whatever they are as good as the newspapers make them to be. The blonde shinobi quickly tossed out a cane connected with metal wire to a nearby wall, which was Enforced by his chakra. Once the caney bit hard into the wall, he began to move up and swing to the wall. Once he got there, he clamped onto the wall with chakra and began to move quickly from building to building by using another kana. This process was not as fast as his chakra chains of the flying thunder god jutsu of his father, but it was going to help him a lot and keep his real power hidden away from those who managed to take a look at him. As he made it there, he spotted a large number of people gathering and saw that there were several armored trucks that were smoking, telling him that this was like that event he had dealt with before. He moved up to a high tower and looked to observe how the two cousins and their armor to the skin companion were doing. They seemed to be doing fine with the bank robbers as the two superpowered siblings crashed in and blocked the bullets from the men.
Juliet,
Na
read
knew
this.
what guns were and had to admit that they scared him a bit since they were faster moving and therefore harder to block.
Of course.
But he knew that they made quite a racket and needed to be maintained more than most, even if one had bought the attachments
I'm an
to silence
asshole.
them.
I'm
He
sorry,
found that
Nina.
out by checking out a
You
gun
are.
owner's magazine when
And
he
I hope
decided to
so.
find out just what were those
really
strange
think I'd mess
devices
around with
used by the
that
police and the robbers'
But I get
age.
stupid jealous.
He had fought
I
with
owe you
before.
dinner.
Superman and
Still love
Supergirl
me?
took the hits and
And
the
you
bullets
do my
merely
laundry.
bounced off of
Thanks,
them.
Max.
And the
You're
same
like the
could be
Blackwell
said for
Ninja.
Steel's
Now
armored
let's see
form.
what Zach
The
has
first
to say
two were a
about
bit
Victoria.
surprising to Na, and the
You set me
second was to be
free.
expected since
Thank
the guy
you.
had a lot of plating
Warren's
on
flash
him.
drive is on my desk.
Narrat watched the trio and saw that they were doing all right, and the blonde cousin of Superman was proving not to be a slouch when it came to sucking bad
Almost
guys in the jaw.
Get the flash drive.
But that
and
was
then
when
I'll go
two
see
green
Lauren.
beams smashed into
Hey,
Superman,
Dana.
and he could hear the pain
Seriously,
coming from the
thanks
guy in
again.
blue and red.
I can't believe
That
Juliet
shout was
locked
just
me
the
in my
beginning.
own room.
As Superman
Real
was sent
mature.
flying back into one of the armored cars, he could already hear the results of the Man of Steel being sent flying away from his comrades. As Supergirl called out to her cousin
Victoria
in
is
shock,
not nice.
he watched as she turned
I
to
don't
find
get it.
out who
She has
attacked them.
everything.
Be you.
And to pull that
T got
prank on
her
a
own
friend,
answer as another pair
just
of
because they're
beams
in the
came at
Vortex
her
Club
direction.
doesn't mean they're BFFs.
She managed to fly
I'm in
up,
it, and
but the
Victoria
shooter hit
creeps me
her,
out.
and she
Max,
too hit
you're
the
smart
ground
to be a
fast and
loner
hard,
here.
and she was
Though
also
Warren
in
obviously
pain.
likes hanging with
Steel
you.
turned, and sure enough, out came the enemy as Na himself got to see him. And he was definitely different. There was a torn face
do you
there,
mean?
and yet the
Oh,
rest of him was
nothing.
all metal, wires,
When you open
and
the
a
flash
host of
drive,
other
didn't you
glowing
see the
parts
special
that
folder
Naruto
called
had no
Maps?
idea about.
Yeah, okay.
At first,
I
he
gotcha.
thought he was looking
Are
at an
you
all-metal
blushing?
version of the combat puppets used
Go
by
ahead and
Suna
grab the flash
Ninja and
drive
Gar's
whenever.
brother, Kanguro. But as he stretched his chakra senses a bit, he was surprised to find that there was some life in that being. And in the back of his mind, he felt the Kaobi stir in him. He watched as that guy with the metallic body fought with steel. And for a moment or so, it seemed that they were evenly matched. That is until the living being of metal managed to sidestep a strike to the head and kick steel in the stomach. The sound of
I better
metal
make
hitting
sure
metal
everything's
made
still
even
in
him
there.
WSE from where
I
he
think
was,
Warren
and he
forgot to
wondered
hide
if
the
Steel
party
was still
buster
alive.
folder.
The
Now
guy
that
was
I
and
would
seemed
open
to
it
be
no matter
still
how
able to take
tempting.
the fight to his
I
foe
have
as he
my
swung the massive
self-respect.
sledgehammer again. The strike hit the metallic being and sent him crashing into a nearby van, and it seemed to be over. But that was until the guy came back and tossed a massive steel slab at Steel. The man managed to smash it aside with his hammer. But that was the opening the guy needed to charge in and hit Steel with a kick to the chest and followed with a knee and a serious right hook. Superman and Supergirl tried to get up, but then the guy fired the same green-colored beams at both of them. And Na saw both
Of course,
Superman
a
and
popular
Supergirl take
cheerleader
the
like
hits
Dana
and
would
cry
have
out
a
in
million
pain.
friends.
The metal being came
So
closer, and
fascinating
it
to
was
get a
there that
peek into
Narrat
Dana's
noted the
social
man's
media
chest
world.
open to reveal a
And
large glowing
yes,
green
Max,
R.
so terribly
And
wrong.
that seemed to throw his senses off a bit, telling him that glowing hunk of stone was a lot more dangerous than it looked. The state of the heroes was pretty bad. So now it was time for him to move, as he now recalled just how this figure was. Matalo was pleased as he was now going to finally eliminate the two thorns to his side. Steel was a problem if he was not watched. But as soon as Supergirl and Superman were out of the way, that armored man was done for. And he could not help but relish the weakened and pained looks of both cousins as he taunted them. You both are finally going to be gone from here, and maybe I can finally get the chance to rule over this damned city once I dispose of a certain backstabbing businessman. Now, let's get down to me getting rid of you both permanently. Before he could finish his rant of the heroes, Matalo felt several rather sharp scrapping sounds, and he turned to see some sharp metallic discs burying themselves into the concrete. And soon he spotted Narrat himself. Matalo growled at his new attacker and spoke to Na. So, you're Los Angeles hero on the block, huh? The Hokage, as they call you. What in the blazes are you doing here in Metropolis? The blonde, in the meantime, was a bit more silent. Seeing this walking monstrosity of metal and whatnot made him remember the times he had to deal with ninjas who used puppets and also the story of Sakura's battle with Sasori himself. The worst, however, was when Toby used the bodies of dead ninja as his own puppets of war long ago. There had been a few other battles with ninjas willing to do anything for power in his time, even giving up the bodies to do so. And those kinds of people gave Naruto more than his fair share of headaches. This one, the one he read about as Matalo, was a totally different kettle of fish. But it was obvious that this guy was no pushover. Matalo was beginning to lose his cool and quickly grabbed a nearby pole from the road and tossed it like a spear at Na. Hey, it's considered bad manners to ignore someone asking questions. Naruto quickly took out one of his swords and channeled his chakra into it and cut the pole in half, then vanishing from sight, much to Metal's surprise, and appeared behind him. And where I come from, Tin Man, it's twice as rude to be throwing spears at people. Metalo turned and saw the young man a fist at him, and he grinned or tried to grin as he was thinking that this guy did not have the strength to hit him as Superman would, and he made that obvious as he spoke. Go ahead, give me your best shot. He showed his metallic chin, expecting the arrogant but fast young man to be screaming in pain with a broken hand, wrist, and arm. What he did not expect is to be punched hard enough to literally send him flying backwards off his feet and smashing into the armored van. The van was caved in and sent back a bit, much to the surprise of the onlookers and to all three heroes, as they had not expected that. Clark had thought that the glowing sphere of energy was the reason he was able to cave in the truck from his debut on TV, while Kara and Steele had thought that few could knock Matalo like that. As for Matalo, he could not help but shake himself a bit and look at the young man who did not even show why sign of pain in his punch. And he had to admit that he was not expecting that blonde to be that strong. As for Naruto, he silently thanked Sakura and Sane for the training in channeling chakra into his body to increase his overall strength.
Please, leave me
He had
alone.
decided to test this attack and reserve his Senjutsu chakra if he needed an edge, or his purified Kyuubi chakra, since the latter was not ideal for something like this. And it seemed that he would not have to resort to that just yet, which was a
Thanks
good
for
thing to the
nothing,
blonde
Max.
shinobi as he readied his sword to fight again. You've got some serious muscles there,
I should've
Hokage.
stepped in
Always
between
thought
Kate
only
and David.
Superman or his
That
cousin could
asshole
hit me
was
that
so
hard,
over the
but you
line.
can't harm me.
I could
I am
rewind and try
indestructible.
something different.
Yeah, I've heard that before. Metal Brain, you planning to fight or talk me to death? Matalo glared and got up, grabbed a large section of the armored car, and quickly tossed it at Naruto like a frisbee, a razor-sharp and jagged metallic frisbee to be more accurate. Naruto wasted no time,
why don't
and
you
quickly
leave her
flipped
alone?
over the attack and moved to face Metalo. The two attacked one another with fists and swords. Metalo proved to be rather tough to Na, as his sword was not cutting at all, and that made Metalo grin like a maniac as he
No, you're
taunted the
not.
blonde.
You're part of
See,
the problem,
your
Missy.
sword's useless
I will
against me.
remember this
Na remained
conversation.
silent and quickly flipped back as Metalo decided to take a shot and charged right at Na, intent on giving the young man a serious punch to the
Max,
jaw.
that was great.
Na, however,
you scared
was
him for
quick on
once.
his feet and dodged the
I have
punch,
to go,
rolled
but
out of
thank
the
you.
way when
It
Metalo
means
tried
a lot.
a knee
Anytime,
strike and
Kate.
then flipped up to land a seriously strong chakra-enhanced spinning
I felt like
sidekick
an
to the head
everyday
of the
hero
cyborg
helping
and sent
Kate,
him
but
forward and trying
now
to balance
Officer
himself.
David Dickhead is
This
after
allowed
me.
Naro to quickly come up with a plan,
Maybe I
and
should
when it came
rewind
to
and
play,
mind my own
he charged at
business?
Matalo, who recovered and launched AF. Ist at Naruto, who moved out of the way and dropped some smoke bombs. The bombs went off, but Metalo was able to recover, turn around and launch an attack at Naruto as the smoke was soon moving away. Nice move, Blondie. You might actually know how to be a ninja, but old trick don't work on one who has special vision. The attack caught Naro in the stomach, and the blonde groaned as Metalo grinned at that while the others looked on in shock and horror. Clark most of all, since he had tried to move and assist the Hokage in fighting Metalo, but the attacks Metalo had used had weakened him. The same could be said for Kara and for Steele. He was still trying to get his armor to recover from the attacks, and she was also trying to fight off the effects of the kryptonite blasts. But they and the others, including Metalo, were in for a surprise when Naruto looked up and grinned, speaking as if the attack did nothing to him at all. Too bad you were looking at the wrong Hokage, Tin Man.
I'm glad
The
I
people
stepped in
watched
that
as
time.
Naruto's body
Can't
suddenly
stand
puffed
to see
away,
people being
and there were
bullied.
large numbers of paper tags there with some form of writing. The tags were also suddenly burning, and before Matalo could react, the tags exploded with the force of several crates of TNT. Narrat had been busy enhancing the explosive qualities of his explosive
Max?
tags
How are
recently,
you?
Here's your
and the
flash.
results of said
Thanks.
changes were obvious as Matalo was
problem.
sent flying backwards off his feet. He
Check out
looked
my
and
new
was
wheels.
surprised to see Nar
Cool.
above him and then
Very
released
old
several
school.
Kana that were also
1978
tagged
to
with
be
explosive tar.
Now we can go to the drive-in.
GS.
There's one in
These
Newburgh
weapons
just 60
quickly
miles
lodged
away.
in the area
You're
where
in
his
the wrong
kryptonite
time,
heart
Roy.
was induced to the
But then,
enhanced
so am
explosions
I.
were enough
You
to
okay?
force the panels open.
It's been one
He hit the ground
strange
hard and
fucking
before
day.
he could react,
Man, I saw
Narrat
that
was there with a
Victoria
very
didn't take down
large
that pic
sphere
of you
of
on
glowing
Facebook.
energy in hand as the
Major
blonde
bitch
shinobi
move.
struck hard. Take this in that rock heart of yours, Odama Rasengan. The very second the attack connected to Metal's kryptonite heart, the blast was immediate
don't
and
wanna talk
unleashed a
about
massive cloud of debris
Jeez,
all over the
You're a little
place.
missensitive
The
today.
ground shook
I
with the
wouldn't push
force
your
of a
luck
bomb
more.
going off
Not
and there
in
was
the
a
mood
large
today.
scream
So
coming
did you
from
get a chance to
Metalo.
check out the movie
The
booty on my
people who
flash
were there
drive?
braced themselves and covered their eyes as the blast of wind and dust was
No,
everywhere.
I've been way too busy
It took a
with
while
class
before the
and
smoke
life.
cleared and there was a very
Damn,
deep
girl,
crater
you had
on
it
the
like
ground.
A year.
Or
That
a
was when they
week. I
spotted
did browse
Matalo
through
being
all the
carried
titles,
out by the
drama
Hokage
queen.
on his shoulder
Ha,
as if he
ha.
was a feather
Make
pillow
sure you
and then
watch
tossed
Cannibal
aside.
Holocaust.
And in the area where the kryptonite heart was,
No
it was
fucking
not there
way will I
anymore.
watch that.
The
My
blonde
mind is
looked about
twisted
and then
enough.
did some hand
I laughed
gestures
my
and then to the
ass
eyes of
off.
everyone in the
So
area.
you're sensitive.
There were several puffs of
Ouch,
smoke and
that
there
sounds
appeared more
awful
of the
the way you
Hogue,
say it.
at least a dozen or more as the middle spoke to them. Go and find any of those rocks and get them all gathered. Hi. With that
No, I
done,
was
the
impressed
other
you had
Hogue moved
faster
away as the
pussycat
apparent
kill, kill.
original moved to get to the
Russ
three
Meyer was a
heroes.
genius of black
Kara
and white.
tried to get up
Plus,
as she
babes
felt
with
the effects
breasts.
of the kryptonite
Who would
injuries
beat
fade
your
away a
sensitive
bit
ass
more.
down?
But to
If
her
I was
surprise,
lucky.
the Hokage
Speaking
then
of ripping
scooped her
fast,
up in his
we should
arms
go down
bridal
in my
style
car
and
to an
moved to a
actual
nearby
movie this
bus
week.
shed that was not totaled
Wait,
by
you
the
seem
fighting.
distracted.
That was something that no one expected to see, least of all Kara, who was blushing as she looked at
I
Nar.
don't want to speak
You
about
all
it.
right? Kara
is
said
kind of a
nothing as
crazy
she
day
was
for
still
me.
trying to get used to
I
the
mean,
fact that
I
only
literally
minutes
think
ago
I'm
she was
going
trading
crazy.
barbs and
I
blaring
may be a
matches with
pest,
this guy
but
and now
I'm
she
a
was
good
rescued
listener.
by said guy. She
For
looked at
reals,
him and
Lauren,
despite
this
her
is
weakened
between
state
you and
used
me,
her X-ray
not
vision to
social
see
media.
him and got another
Don't
reason
insult me.
to blush when she saw
Go
Naruto's
on.
face and she
I
had to
this
admit that he was
incredibly
rather good
bizarro
looking.
experience in Mr.
Nar had
Jefferson's
no
class
idea why
today.
the superpowered blonde
I mean,
teen was turning red on the
life-changing.
face, but he would have to be a
Have you
liar
ever
to say
had a
that he did
dream
not
so
find it
real
rather
that it was
attractive
like
and
a
amusing.
movie?
It was
Max
only when he
Caulfield, right?
realized that like her cousin, she can have
One of the
vision to see
Jefferson's
through
photo
things,
groupies?
so she must
I'm
have
one of
seen
his
his face,
students.
and that made
What
him
the
smirk
fuck
mentally.
ever? I know
But
you
he
like
managed
take
to get
pictures,
his thoughts
especially
focused
when
and
you're hiding
spoke
out in the
once more as they
bathrooms.
reached the bus
You
shed.
best tell me what you
Hey,
told the principal.
not that I mind the
Now.
looking and all, but I asked if you were all right.
Answer me,
Oh,
bitch.
yeah, I'm fine.
What are you talking
Just
about?
need to rest up
I
a
know
bit
you're new
more.
here, but don't
Naruto
even
grinned
play
behind
stupid
his
with me.
mask and as
I'm
soon
not
as he
new.
looked
I've
away,
lived here for
the cage
years.
bushin were coming
And you
back.
should know the
Keeping in
Prescotts
mind how
own
the
this
two
shithole.
flying heroes
Then you don't have
reacted
to
to the
worry
rock of
about me.
green,
Worry
he
about
made
yourself.
sure to ask something
Do
to
not
the recovering
analyze me.
Superman
I
who was
paid
with
you
him
for
now.
that.
As Steel
Worry
was
about
back on
yourself,
his feet
Max
and
Caulfield.
apparently alive and breathing to boot. You have anything that can shield you from that glowing rock powering
I
tin
could
man
call
over
the
there?
police.
Yeah,
it. The
it's lead.
Prescotts own
That's
the
the only
pigs here.
stuff
Get away
that
from
can
her,
block
dude.
the kryptonite radiation. Ha, so that's the
Hey,
name of said
leave him
rock.
alone.
All right
Nobody
then,
tells
I'll
me
just
what to
have my
do.
buddies
Not
take
my
it a long
parents,
distance
not the
away and
principal,
when you
or that
recover
whore
enough,
in the bathroom.
they will tell me where they hid it so you can get that lead stuff you need. Clark had no idea how that was possible and was
Max?
about to ask when
Chloe?
Narrat spoke to him once
No
more
way.
while pointing at a very tower.
You again.
L building at the
Go,
distance.
I got
They said that they placed all of the pieces in a very large bag on that tower over there.
Get your punk
Can you
asses
see
out
it?
there now.
Clark did so,
even try to
and
run.
sure enough,
Nobody-
the bag was there, held by
Nobody!
metallic wire, and you could see that the kryptonite was there in the bag, so he was assured that the man was not hiding it from him and the others. Yes, I can. Good. See you, Superman. Or should I call you Clark Kent? Clark's eyes widened at that as he turned around to face Naro, and it took a lot of his willpower to not react to the fact that the Hokage had just
Nathan
figured out.
Prescott is messed
But as he
up
did so,
and
all he saw was a
dangerous.
swirling circle of
This
leaves.
day never ends.
As Naruto was no
Oh,
longer
and
there,
thanks,
the
Chloe.
only thing he saw was a note which was sealed with the
After
man's
5
leaf
years, you're still
signature.
Max Caulfield.
He took it up and saw that there was a message to Superman Clark Kent.
Don't give me
Don't
the
worry
guilty
about
face.
your
At least
identity.
pretend you're glad
I
to
am
see
not
me.
telling
I
anyone
am
since I can
seriously
tell that you
glad
are
to
a
see
good
you.
man and you carry a lot of burdens on your shoulders. Namely, that incident with that dark, whatever that alien nut job's name is.
I need to
I
go to
might
my
sound
room
weird,
and return
but
Warren's
I know
flash
what
drive.
it's like to be treated with disdain and suspicion. And I know the desire to work hard to prove yourself that you are a different person and not what others think you are. I read all there is to know about you before and after that.
Oh look,
And
It's
I have
Max
to say,
Caulfield,
you have a
the
lot of
selfie
guts
hell
and
of
grit.
Blackwell.
I like that a lot. You could have
What a
used your
lame
powers to
gimmick.
do what you like
Even
and kick
Mark,
the law
Mr.
on the I know
Jefferson,
how that
falls for
goes
your
since
wave
I used
hipster
to give the
bullshit.
law the finger when I was younger.
The Daguerrean
But you used your
process,
powers
sir.
for the right
You
reasons.
could barely even
And I
say
learned
that.
to fight for
I
a
guess
better
you got your
purpose
meds
than
filled.
just pulling pranks and causing mischief. That's why I respect you. So I promise to you as a ninja and as
Since
the
you know
Hokage,
all
I
the
will not
answers,
reveal your
I guess you have to
identity to
find another
anyone
way
for
into
as
the
long
dorm.
as I live.
We ain't moving.
And I wish you the best in what you do.
Oh, wait.
Dad,
Hold that
BOPS,
pose.
this note is going to burn up, so I suggest you drop it. I'm
So
not kidding, by the
original.
way. The
Don't
special
worry,
seal I
Max.
put in
I'll
it
put a
kicks
vintage
in a
filter
minute
on it
after
right
the note's
before I post
open.
it all over
Clark
social
then was
medias.
surprised
Now,
when the note did
why
burst
don't you
into
go fuck
flame,
yourself,
which
Vee?
quickly reduced it to ash,
Oh, yes,
and he could not
Victoria.
help but
I'll
shake
get your
his head as
bony ass
Kara
out of my
walked up
way.
to him. What happened? Where did he go? Clark shook his head and spoke to Kara in private. He knows who I am. Kara's eyes widened as she digested that bit of information. Clark's part of being Superman had been one of the best kept secrets they both had, and now it seemed that someone else knew about it. How did that even happen in the first place? She looked at her cousin and spoke to him as calmly as she could possibly manage. How did he do it? I don't know, but he said he was not going to reveal it. And for some reason, I get the feeling that he is telling the truth, Kara. Are you sure, Clark? For all we know, he was lying to make you lower your guard or something. I know, but the fact is that he went out of his way to get that kryptonite away from us. And if he wanted to reveal how he knew who I really am, he could have done it the very second he found out about it. All we can do is see if he is going to do what he promised. ... Later, Naruto was back in his hotel and had taken all of his clothing, weapons, and armor back into the storage scrolls and sat down to begin meditating to heal himself with Senjutsu chakra. The battle with that Metalo guy was definitely a step above the norm. The only thing he felt could come close was the battle his wife Sakura alongside the old lady of Sunyunayo with the Akatsuki member and puppet prodigy Sazori. That kind of foe was something that Naruto was not fully prepared for. But he had to admit that the battle was interesting. And it seemed that as he recovered from the injuries, the Kaiba, or rather Kurama, agreed with him. Finally, we get to have a chance to fight a decent fight. That metallic being in human form was a far better challenge than those punks and low-level wretches we dealt with before. You seem happy all of a sudden, Kurama. Weren't you listening to me, brat? If this is but one
Sorry,
villain,
no
then perhaps
paparazzi
this
allowed.
world can be challenging after all. Well, I'm glad you
Thank
approve,
Max.
because if that battle was
Rewind
any
and find
indication,
something.
this world's got a lot more in store for us. About bloody time, too. This place was getting boring. Say, why don't we try and see if we can handle facing that Superman in a sparring match? That should make sure you can get the damned rust in your joints to leave. You want to run that by me again, Kurama? You want me to face Superman in a
I
match?
must have missed
You
something.
realize that the guy's
I
got
should
cage level
rewind.
chakra in him. Even to the point he's got the chakra level to be close to a Gingari in initial form. And he's not even a human to boot. He's not even an enemy of
Sorry,
ours or a
no
criminal.
paparazzi allowed.
And you want me to fight him? Don't be such a wuss nah. You haven't had a decent workout of a fight for weeks to a month here in this world.
Do you understand
Even
English?
back there in where we
Get
came
lost.
from, the fights have been few and far in between. You might train your butt off every now and then, but nothing
None
beats
shall
fighting an
pass.
actual opponent.
Capiche?
And even Cage Bushin will not cut it anymore. Besides, it's a sparring match, not a death match, you blonde-haired adult . And you have to admit that fighting someone like that is something that can really be a good way to get you back to shape. I cannot believe I just heard you say that. Let's just focus on staying off the radar for now. The less likely we get attention to ourselves, the better. Now, I am the one who was shocked. You actually want to stay off the radar. What happened to the blonde adult who loved to get attention whenever he could? He grew up and I were to recall. You approved of it. Ha. Point taken. So, we're going to just stay here in the city then? No. I'm off to see the rest of the world. Maybe Gotham City. Heard the place should be interesting. The Kaiba seemed to accept that. And while Naruto could tell that Kurama was now taking another nap, he could tell that his resident Boo was mumbling about the chance to finally find some new and worthy foes to fight.
I must have missed
And truth be
something.
told, he was
I should
actually
rewind.
looking forward to the chance to finally fight some worthwhile foes as well. For now, however, he decided to lay low and just observe while writing more of his stories before packing it up and going to Gotham City. He was also going to check out just what other villains were out there in the city to see just what he could dig up, as well as possibly find some more inspiration, as his old sensei and godfather used to call it. Once he felt fully recovered, he went back to writing as he began to recall some of his adventures with his allies back in his world. Plus, he recalled just who he had seen, namely a certain reporter lady and Superman's cousin. For the rest of the week, Naruto remained incognito, a feat that Kurama was still trying to grasp considering the way Na acted in their world and had focused only on making his next set of books and also on that story that was based on his life. He did on occasion go out to see the rest of Metropolis and also take a peek at what else he could see as well as who else. On one occasion, he got to tangle with none other than Livewire, formerly known as Leslie Wilkins. The female villain had been terrorizing some of the residents and trying to cause mayhem when he decided to step in while wearing his full costume, armor, and weapons. And while Livewire laughed at his looks a bit, he was on full combat mode. He decided to use a jutsu he took years to develop to counter Livewire's ability to use electricity, which was similar to the lightning armor used by the fifth wreckage. The wind moved at extreme speeds around him and even gave him the ability to fly, which was something that Livewire did not anti-chi. And it seemed that while he was from another world, the principles of chakra-controlled elements seemed to work here still, as he was able to handle some if not all of her attacks. He then used his water jutsu that he spent a lot of time learning from both Kakashi when his John and sensei was Street Ill alive, and also from Mei, who taught her use of water jutsu to him. He unleashed a powerful series water blasts to force her back and then unleashed a wave of Mizu Bushin. That was no mean feat since water-based chakra was not his type. But it worked as Livewire was shorted out and he left the scene, but not before leaving a note to Superman. Once he got back to the hotel, he bemoaned the fact that during the battle, his cloak got singed a bit by a lightning blast from the crazy woman, though Kurama replied that it was a small prick. To pay to face a new and interesting foe. He kept his promise and did not reveal Clark's role as Superman. And when he finally decided to leave Metropolis, he went back to the planet in Hench as a delivery guy made his way to where Clark's desk was and left another note. One that said that he was now leaving the city and still intended to make sure that he will keep his promise of not compromising Clark's secret. As he left to the elevators, he passed none other than Clark and Lois and merely grinned secretly as he went down the elevator and spotted Clark as he read the note. Once he was out of the planet, he headed off to get his things, check out of the hotel, and make his way to the nearest airport. He was rather curious about those things and hoped that it was not going to be a bad ride. Just what and who he was going to find in Gotham was still unknown, but he could bet 10 to 1.
See if this works.
It was going to a man dressed like a bat and fought like a ninja. If he was lucky, and since he had the luck of the devil, as some of his friends and family called it, he had no doubt he was going to meet the Dark Knight. On what set of circumstance? Though he had no idea. So guys, what do you think about this Naruto story? Tell me your opinion in the comments. And if you want more Naruto what if stories, make sure to subscribe to Universe of Naruto. Thanks for watching.